Great. Today we're trying something a little different. Instead of one guest, we're doing a topic. I wanted to talk about the New York City Photo District in the 1980s, where a number of us came up through. I worked alongside Joe and Billy Neumann, Jack Reznicki, who are all here. And so just like some people introduce themselves. So maybe we'll start with Bob Kiss. Tell us a little
thank
bit.
you. I had a studio on 19th Street between Park and Broadway. I think I moved in and started construction on April 1st, 1976. And I used to joke it was the longest ongoing April Fool's joke in my life. And I left New York. I sold the studio and left New York around, I sold the studio back to the landlord. I'm trying to remember, it's 91-ish. And then I moved to Barbados in 93. So I was in the photo district from about 76 to 91. Park and Broadway, 19th Street. Our block had Barbara Bordnick, the late Jimmy Moore, a couple of other people. And that's me.
Cool. Joe, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I worked in New York for a long time. I worked as an assistant, and I opened my own business. I had a studio on West 27th Street, then East 20th Street, and finally I settled in Tribeca down on Warren Street, a couple of blocks from the World Trade Center. And when towers came down, it kind of ended that operation. But hey, what can you say? So I started working out of my house in New Jersey, and that worked out pretty well. So the photo district is expanding as we speak.
Where in New Jersey were you living?
Maplewood.
Okay, I grew up in Elizabeth and Linden.
Maplewood was lousy with photographers. I moved to Maplewood, and all of a sudden I run into all these people. Barber, Galante, Arthur Cohen, E.J. Carr. I mean, everybody lived in Maplewood. So.
You live near
Rosenberg.
You live near Robert Farber.
Ken Rosenberg. I live in Portland, Oregon now. In the 80s, I was mostly an assistant. Did a little bit of my own shooting. I probably am most related to this group because I was the organizer of an assistant referral service through ASMP.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of us started the ASMP Assistant Photographers Committee back around 1981. That's where some of you may have seen the photo of the Gophers softball team that came out of that. We won't go into some of the Gophers stories.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Let's not talk about that.
Billy Neumann, you have sound?
Yeah.
Come on, Bill.
He got up and walked away. I guess he doesn't want to talk to us. Jack Reznicki, tell us a little bit
about me. I got my first studio in 1980 at 119 5th and 19th Street. Right now, I was there 5 years and then moved to 568 Broadway. Although I assisted for a bunch of people. Started at Nick Samard Studios, studio manager. Was supposed to go to Bill Stetner's studio. He was going to hire me, and then I decided better than I thought, maybe not work for Bill Stetner.
Well, what year was that, Jack?
Oh, that would have been 70, 78.
I worked for Bill in 80. That was a fun job. You should have taken that job. That was a fun job.
Yeah. Oh, I just froze. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
My picture froze on me. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
your
kinda
picture's
weird.
frozen, but your voice is coming through. There, now you moved.
Jack, you might want to turn off your video and just do voice. You may not have enough bandwidth.
I don't think we have his voice anymore either.
Yeah, we lost you, Jack. So Bill, you're back there. You have your sound. Can you hear? Can you talk to us? I don't think
John,
so.
it's your turn. Introduce
My
yourself.
turn. Let's see. I started in 1979 at Cranston Gould, assisting in a catalog studio for about a year or so, then went over to NZS Catalog Studio as a photographer, assisted Dennis Gottlieb and Jeff Morgan, and then went on my own for a little while, then discovered computers and got out of New York. Worked for Adobe for 25 years and ended up back in Seattle or ended up in Seattle and had my own head shop business for a while till COVID shut that down. And now I'm just doing my own thing. Here in Seattle, I've worked a lot with Michelle Bates, who's from New Jersey also. Say hi to everyone, Michelle.
Hi. Yep. We're partners in crime, shooting all the crazy circus people in Seattle.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Oh,
It
it's
is.
totally fun. It's ridiculously fun.
And there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Let's see. Bill Newman's saying that he can't hear anything.
I'm turn up the volume. That usually does it.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you connect automatically, my volume sometimes goes down to protect your ears, who knows what. His volume is up, he's saying.
Let's.
Well, let's tell stories about Newman.
Yeah, I don't know any, but I'd like to hear some.
Yeah.
Which
I'm
one,
sure
Billy
we
or
have
Arnold?
some.
Billy or Arnold?
Hey, listen, it reminds me of, what's her name in Steel Magnolias, Olympia Dukakis. She says, if you haven't got anything nice to say about anyone, come sit next to me. Exactly. That's my philosophy.
I always like that line.
It's good dish, yeah? Or dis nowadays.
Well, to know Bill Newman is to love Bill Newman. I'll tell you that right now. Bill is a great assistant, worked around a lot. Now he's got his own business now. He's written a book about Rutherford, New Jersey, which I think is a good travel book. And he's a denizen of Rutt's Hut, which is a local hot dog joint out there. So
Yeah, Jack, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back.
You froze up for a while there.
Yeah, I
anyone
froze
else
up and
wanna-
then somebody call came in.
Yeah.
Do you want me to finish my little spiel?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I assisted for a bunch of people. I was going to say Henry Wolf, Jane Arnold, Larry Robbins. One job for Steve Steigman, and the only job I worked for him was the Maxell ad, where the guy getting blown out, who was a hair and makeup guy I knew quite well, Jack Colello, who made like $700,000 from that gig. Then I moved down to Soho for 20 years in 1985, and then finished up on West 27th Street. So a lot of changes in the photo district.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out how to get Billy in. Still
Jack, what
can't
would
hear us.
you say if you had to like put borders on the photo district? Where would that be?
Most of it was geared around the Flatiron district for the most part. When I moved down to Soho, that was the edge of the world. That was my rep, Elise, at the time, was saying, I don't know if I can get clients to go that far downtown. I mean, 14th Street was about the cutoff. I mean, but my building, just on my floor, I had Art Kane was next door to me, which was interesting. He was further down the hall than me. So every time we opened the door and there was some, gorgeous model standing there, we didn't have to say a word. We just looked at her. We said, next door. 2 more doors down. And let's see, Barry O'Rourke was across the hall. The guy that I first assisted for, Nick Samarge, was across the hall. Greg Heisler moved in down the hall. Graham Peterson was on another floor. I mean, it was a great building. We had a lot of people in it. It was, and
That
it was
was the
nice
photo
because
district.
that was our little photo community.
You had your own photo district there, because I usually thought of from like Fifth Avenue and 23rd down to 17th or so, and maybe 6th Broadway.
Yeah, that was, you know, the concentration of the labs.
Yeah,
And
all the
Um,
suppliers.
yeah, photo supplies. I mean, how many people here remember Photo Exchange? Because last time we were talking,
Oh,
how many
yeah.
people remembered
Oh,
Photo
yeah.
Exchange?
So photo
Yeah, with
exchange, yes,
Bert.
of course,
Yeah, with Bert.
Yeah, Photo Exchange, Dugal,
20th and 5th.
um, and what's the name? The outfit out of Chicago had a
Calumet.
store. Calumet had a
Calumet.
store in like 20th between 5th and 6th.
Yeah, so that's an interesting story about Calumet. The guy, you go back to Photo Care. Remember Photo Care on
Mhm.
5th Avenue?
Yeah,
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right, so I used to, when I was working, I used to work around the corner from this still that guy. And I used to have breakfast every morning with Pete Viasati and Julio Figueroa, who worked.
I
at
invited
Photo Care.
Peter today, but I don't see him yet.
Well, maybe he'll jump on, but I used to have breakfast with those guys every morning. And then Pete opened his own business called Photo Marketplace, and he did it. He just had a showcase, one counter up in Kusler Celestin's loft up on 920 Broadway. Kusler made strobes, right? And then Pete got a floor somewhere on West 20th on the even side of the street. I forget what it was, 12 or 22, something like that. And then Calumet bought his operation, and he became a president of Calumet Photo.
Hmm.
And then and he moved out to Chicago, and I lost track
kidding.
with him. I came out here 13 years ago, and I was I'd been president of the New Jersey chapter of ASMP when I moved out here, so they quickly installed me as a vice president of the Chicago chapter. And the first meeting I went to was at this place called Pro Gear, which is on West Campbell. And I walk in, and there's Pete, and he owns Pro Gear. So it's kind of
How
nice to know
about,
somebody.
Yeah, how about anybody remember Swiss Camera Repair? And that guy Joe
Yes.
used
Oh,
to
yeah.
smoke like a chimney.
Yeah.
And also Peter Lou and Flash
Peter Lou
Clinic.
Flesh Clinic
Oh,
with,
yeah.
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 who worked with Peter there?
oh God.
Larry
Larry.
Farrell.
Larry.
Yeah, Larry
yeah,
Farrell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I saw
was
Larry
great.
about 4 years ago at WPPI. Because Larry sold me my first flash unit, a little Neumann 202 AC powered version of their 200 watt second kit.
And
Peter,
my friend
when
Mickey opened a flash rental place called New York Flash. It was on
Right.
21st Street, 22nd Street. I can't remember.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Dugal was the big lab, but split off a bunch of other labs like Babu,
Yeah.
just down
yeah.
the street.
Babu,
One of my-
Carol, US Color. Well,
Yeah, one of my favorite views.
That was it.
I was
US
on
Color.
19th between Park and Broadway on the second floor. And the warehouse for 47th Street Photo was directly across the street from my office windows. So I'd be there making business calls or whatever. And these guys would be, these Hasidim would be throwing boxes of camera gear into the back of the UPS truck. They'd have like one of those big carts, they'd roll it out, and they'd just be tossing it. I was like, you know, somebody's Hasselblad, Leica, and Nikon or Canon just got bounced around. It was amazing to watch. It was incredible. I thought to myself,
47th Street Photo, their tagline was, "We lose $1 on every sale, but make it up in volume."
Yeah.
But I think the IRS finally got them.
IRS figured that out.
Yeah,
Anybody work at with Lens and Repro?
of course,
yeah.
Stu K.
oh yeah, Stu
when-
K. Yeah.
yeah,
I got to tell you, I had one dealing with them, and it was the last time I said I'd walk into the store. I bought a lot of Mamiya gear from Photo Exchange, and I needed one more back from something for a job. I wanted to have an extra back for something, so I bought it from them, and I had nothing but trouble with it. And I brought it back. They repaired it. They sent it for repair. Came back, same problem. Sent it back to them again. Came back, same problem. I brought it back to them. I'm saying, you know, what the heck? And they're saying, well, we looked up your account and you don't do enough business with us for us to send it back to Mamiya. So it's all up to you. So I sent it to Mamiya, and Henry Froelich, who actually became a very good friend, Henry and his wife became friends of mine. Henry didn't know me, and he wrote me the nicest letter saying, we have it, we know the history of it. If we can't figure out what the problem is, we'll just send you a new one. And that's what he did. Henry, I'll tell you, at Mamiya was just, him and PK were just sweethearts. Same thing with Jan Lederman, who now's the survivor and owns the Mac group, they call it.
Henry was the old guy, right?
Henry and PK, yeah, they were the two old guys. Jan
They
was the
were
younger guy.
sweet little old men, as I recall.
Yeah, they quite a history. Henry invited me for dinner once with Dr. Ruth, who was a good friend of his. And PK lent me a book from about the starting of Neiman Marcus. And it was a book by Stanley Marcus, who turned out was a good friend of PK's. And wrote him a really nice letter, a nice note in the book. So after I borrowed it, that was a book I made sure I gave back to him. But it was an interesting book. But they were interesting people. They were, refugees from Europe, and they started a little company and distribution. And I love my Mamiyas. I mean, I said this last time. I switched over from Hasselblad to Mamiya as soon as I tested out the RZ for the type of pictures I was doing.
I remember correctly, Henry was the technical brains, PK was the money, and Jan was the marketing.
Exactly. Very good.
Yeah, Ken Rosenberg was bringing up a point that in the film era, we need to be near the film processors. Did the change from film to digital change the photo district or expand it or make it even go away? But I think the rents made it go away.
Well, we had that in Seattle even, where we used to all see each other at the labs and needed to be around there. And then when everyone went digital, we don't see anyone anymore.
Yeah, well, the two main labs closed down. People
Are
used
we
to.
the last generation who's going to talk about a photo district?
Probably.
Well, the whole thing about the photo district was interesting. In the good old days, I think most of you would concur. If you want to be in advertising photography, you had to be in New York, San Francisco, or Chicago, maybe Los Angeles, but there weren't many other places you can work. And then in 1986, a couple of things happened that changed our business forever. One was the invention of the fax machine, and the other was a curious business opened up called Federal Express. So it used to be somebody would call you on the phone from Ogilvy and Mather and say, "Hey, we need your portfolio, Joe. Can you get it up here?" And I'd say, "Sure." I'd pick up the phone. I'd call a messenger and send it up to Ogilvy or wherever. And you really had to be in town to be able to do that. Once FedEx came around, if you were from like Jackson, Mississippi, and you wanted to stay home, you could have your portfolio on somebody's desk by 10:30 tomorrow morning just by shipping at FedEx. And with fax machines, you could deliver estimates and proposals in seconds from wherever you were. Of course, it was made even worse by the internet because now nobody had even ship portfolio's anymore.
And cell phones, so you can have any area code.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That
much.
Decentralized, that helped to decentralize it. Yeah, it's FedEx really changed our deadlines.
Yeah, because I used to do a lot of
everything
traveling.
up.
Somebody wanted to do an industrial shoot in Dothan, Alabama. They'd call me on the phone. I'd fly down to Dothan and rent a hotel
Hey, I've been
room
to
and rent a
Dothan.
car and drag my assistant. And then all of a sudden, we got a guy in Dothan. And I was out of a job,
Yeah,
I'll tell you another thing that had a major impact on the distribution of photographic work, and that was APA. When APA started, ASNP didn't have the same kind of agency type advertising photographer outside of New York City, but when APA started, they brought basically business practices throughout the country. And what ended up happening is that anybody anywhere would operate with similar business practices. And from the agency's point of view, it was like, wherever the photographer was, it didn't really matter.
Yeah, that APA started as a committee in ASMP.
Absolutely.
And it all came down to the estimate invoice form.
Yep.
ASMP didn't want to deal with it, and we said that this was critical, trying to get it uniform across the country, which we weren't able to do, but at least we got it out. And that I was on the first board of APA. In fact, I was on the board where we voted to go national because it was just New York based at that time. And our executive director, Dory, was it Dory?
Yep.
Forgot her name. She,
Dory.
she was dead against it. And she said, this will kill the association. And in some ways she was right. There were some problems. That's why New York broke away. I was involved with that. And Michael, you were the reason that the APA New York rejoined national, specifically you. You were the one that basically forced it. So
Seems
you're
at
the
a
one
loss for
responsible.
words.
Mike
Yeah,
Newler,
that was-
Kingmaker,
Your
That
fault.
was something he did behind the scenes because of the sponsorship. He threatened to pull the sponsorship if it continued, and that
Wait a minute,
forced it back in.
But I don't threaten. I don't.
Yeah, right.
I don't threaten.
Yeah, you're so calm and collected, and yeah, that's you, Michael.
Break your legs.
Yeah. Look at
Yeah,
his nose just grow.
No, I got to tell you something. I always had a feeling that the reason why Dory didn't want it to happen was because she wanted control. She
Absolutely.
thought that
She wanted
Yeah.
the money.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you one of the reasons we broke away is we started, I went to Kodak and got, I think it was a 3-year commitment from, oh God, what's his name? The president.
Ray DeMullen.
Ray DeMullen, exactly,
Right.
thank you. I mean, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce our first competition. And I said, this is the engine that's going to finance all of APA. If we have the competition and charge entry fees, and the first one was fantastic. We had Victor Skrbneski flew in, Robert Sobieski flew in. We had incredible judges, and it was fantastic. And then what's her name out in California killed it. The person there, because she didn't want it to interfere with her competition, where she made money and I think stole from the association. And she killed it. She single-handedly killed that
Who was that?
competition.
Who was that?
Oh, it was the president of the LA chapter, and eventually they had to fire her. But she was taking like 80% of the budget for her salary.
Oh, I thought that was Dory out in LA,
No.
the executive director.
Yeah, that was Dory in LA. I forgot. The woman in New York was somebody else.
Yeah,
It
and
wasn't
she
Dory.
actually was a pretty good executive director. Dory was the one that almost sunk the organization on multiple occasions.
Yeah, she was a horror.
Well, I
think we could've been much
remember the
further
first
along.
APA meeting that I went to was in Philip Holzman's studio in New York. And you
Still
were
hear
probably
nothing.
there, Bill Stetner, Hal Davis, David Langley, and
Carl-
the whole
Carl
thing
Fisher.
was, huh?
Carl Fisher, which was amazing
Carl
that
Fisher.
he was on the board, because Carl Fisher was one of the guys who testified in Washington against ASMP for forming a trade union.
Yeah.
So I knew that about his history, and here he was sitting on the first APA board because suddenly he saw the light about organizing.
But that was when everybody was trying to come up with the estimate form. And then also the decision on whether or not to go national, because I was on the board, the steering committee for APA Chicago. APA Chicago was the second chapter, even actually before LA. And I just remember getting into a big argument with Hal Davis, and Hal Davis looked at me and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Jeff Shuey from Chicago." He said, "Oh, you don't matter." And that was my introduction to the hoity-toity New York photographers. But
Well,
the
that
other
was
thing that I really appreciated was David Langley and all the work that he did towards helping to, wasn't he chapter president for a while?
Yes,
I think he was the first president.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
And-
he was a real big fish too. Speaking
And,
of,
and his wonderful bar.
Yep.
Love
and
that
his
bar.
at the bar.
Yeah.
But the one
Yeah,
thing that I'm really, being an outsider to the photo district, the one thing
I'm
that I
done.
really,
Fuck this place. Terrible.
Is that Newman? You get some sound?
Newman's got sound. No, you know, Jeff,
Shit.
that whole thing is all about politics. What really
yeah.
solved that problem was software. I remember there was some kind of application ran only on IBM PCs called the Boss, and then there's
Yep.
Tom Zimberoff out in San Francisco come up with Photo Byte, and all of a
Yep.
sudden people started using software to do their estimates and invoicing, and everything ended up being
That's right.
standardized, and you didn't have to
Well,
fight over photo politics anymore.
Yeah, Tim Olives was
Well-
actually the first one.
Well,
Tim
you did
Oliver.
have,
Atlanta, correct?
but you did have to continue
Tim-
to fight on it.
Tim Oliver
And-
was the guy who came up with Boss.
and I don't know whether it was ever resolved. We got involved with this thing that when they did TV, when they did commercials, that they could bill for background paper and all this other stuff that we still photographers couldn't do because they would always say to us, well, you got it in your storeroom.
That's how all that mess came around, because
That's
guys
right.
like Langley were starting to shoot film.
Right.
Langley and Henry Sandbank, they were starting to shoot film. And the film industry, the commercial industry, everybody had to have a standardized form because it was all unionized,
That's right.
right?
Well, it was a bottom line markup is what it was.
Yeah.
It was a
And
standardized
we all
markup.
started doing it. Somebody had asked me,
Yeah, I did
why
it.
do you charge me $35 for a roll of film? I can go to Kmart and get it for $6. And I said,
So
yeah,
they get it.
but it
They
won't have
get
my
it.
pictures on it.
Yeah, but
No,
they-
there was a better argument for that, Joe. And what I used to tell clients, I said, you want to buy the film for $6? No problem. Listen, I'm going to need, 30 rolls, but you better get about 50 rolls because we don't know if we're going to go
Test
extra, and you can keep the extras. Then you got to test it, make sure they're all the same emulsion, test it
Keep it
beforehand.
refrigerated.
See if
Yeah.
keep it
I
refrigerated.
could have gone
And I'd
through
go
the
through the whole
explanation.
spiel. I did
But
the
I
whole
found it
spiel,
easier to-
and that stopped everybody.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
could
but
have
there
gone
was
through the
another
same
thing that
explanation.
happened.
We had to
There was
buy
a-
it, we had to pay for it, we had to store it, we had to keep it refrigerated, we had to test it, we had, we had to process it, and we had to be
Joe,
banked.
take a breath, Joe, because Bob wants to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to toss in here, it's in the same vein. When I started learning filmmaking and doing some TV commercials, what the film industry did, and this affected the whole idea of a photo district as well, is what I learned from them was own nothing. Have no
That's
fixed costs.
Right, that's right.
Minimum fixed costs. Everything's variable cost. I actually went out to shoot in LA somewhere around 1980 or 81. And I would go to these enormous, these places you say, wow, this film company. You go into Santa Monica and they'd be a pretty little building with 3 or 4 offices. And they're making all these multi-million-dollar films because they owned nothing. They hired a production company. They hired the lighting people. When they needed sets, they had them built. When they needed props, they rented them or had them made. Nothing, zero or minimum fixed costs. And let me tell you, that was a real eye-opener to me. Even though I held on to my studio until I left New York, I really was saying to myself, why? Because film people, they don't own studios. Production companies own studios. They are about facility and equipment. But the actual people, the creative people, they didn't own anything. I think this whole thing that what you were saying about them being able to build for backgrounds, the film people, backgrounds, film, build for everything, and we still photographers couldn't. I think this whole film attitude washed in, and it changed the industry, and it also changed, why do I have to have a studio? Remember that, I know you all remember around 85, so many people didn't have studios, would rent when they were shooting and didn't have that overhead when they weren't. And a lot of people who had studios would be renting them out. No longer was it an
Right.
ego thing. It was like, hey, why should I have a dark day? That's what the film people call it. Why should I have a dark day? They eat you alive. I used to joke that the studio was like a pet lion. If you didn't feed it, it started chewing on your right leg. So if you had a dark day, you were losing serious money. I don't need to tell you all what happened to the rents between 1980 and 1990. You
Mhm.
just keep adding zeros, you know?
Well,
So anyhow,
especially,
yeah, go
especially in
ahead.
the photo district, because once the photographers got into the photo district and started legitimizing that whole area and cleaning up their studios, all of a sudden, the advertising agencies were coming downtown into the photo district rather than pay the high square foot cost uptown. I mean, there was Bozella Jacobs and God knows. what.
Marsteller.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And well, that happened in Soho too. It was the exact same thing. Soho
Yeah.
was
gentrification,
terrible.
gentrification.
Yeah, and it was the photo studios and art galleries that changed Soho so quickly.
I can remember that I got into an argument with
everybody.
With everybody. No, with
Nikon.
that too. With Lieber Katz. I worked for them. I was a staff photographer, and then they got rid of the studio because they were in the GM building, and the studio in the GM building was 1,500 square feet, and they needed.
I was
space
there
for
in
art.
low ceilings and very low ceilings. I worked there.
Yeah, but you know,
in
you're
that
dealing with
studio.
packs of cigarettes, you know. Okay. Anyway, as a matter of fact, the name of the company was actually Lieber Katz Paccioni.
So Billy, is your system working now?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good.
Billy,
Why don't you
Billy,
introduce yourself?
Billy used to
Yeah.
be an assistant of mine.
I was assistant of pretty much everybody on this thing.
I know Bill worked for me too. I think, were you on the TV show I did, World of Photography?
Yeah, right. I was. That's right, John. That's right. Yeah, and I worked with everybody else. I probably one of the weirdest thing is that I actually for 30 years taught people how to be assistant photographers with School of Visual Arts. Dun dun dun. Yeah, no, and we did it in my studio, 873 Broadway. If you're ever by Broderson, we took over Broderson space. We had a terrific studio up until like 5 months before COVID hit. Smart us. And I was in there with David White and Sarah Silvers, was our main renter. But I used to drag people in there, School of Visual Arts, 2 or 3 times a year, 6-week course, and burn the hell out of them because, I wanted them to be successful in photography, commercial photography. First thing you were talking about before about owning, stuff. I used to say, why the hell do you want to own anything? You're an assistant photographer. You aren't owned by anybody. You could be owned by somebody for a week, a year, a month, or whatever. But, if you need anything, go over to PhotoCare, somebody like that, and rent it.
Right.
And ask them how to use it.
I'll tell you something. An interesting happened. I took when I was an assistant. Some photographer sent me up to Marty Fortune's to get a camera fixed, and I walk in, and Marty says to me, "Hey Joe, come here. I want to show you something." And he brings me into the back, and he says to me, "How many guys that you work for are shooting 35, but you're taking a Hasselblad with them so they can make a Polaroid?" And I said, "All of them." He says, "I want to show you this." And he pulled out a Nikon F body with a Polaroid back on it, and it rotated. It made 4 pictures on a single sheet of 108 film. And Marty said to me, "I got this, and I got a better version that was only made 2 pictures, which is ultimately what the Fortune Pro back was." But he said to me, he says, I want you to buy one of these." And I said, "Marty, what am I going to do with it?" He says, "You're going to buy it. I'm going to charge you $1,500. You're going to buy it, and you're going to rent it for $30 a day to everybody you work for, and you're going to make a fortune." And he was right. He was right. You hired
Marty
me.
knew the stuff. He knew the field. He
knew everything.
Yeah, I used to rent everything to photographers that I worked for. I worked for a guy that came down from Boston. I basically would pick him up at the airport, and I would go, everything he had, everything he needed. I think he maybe brought cameras, but I've rented rowboats, that I've owned, motorcycles, scuba gear, everything. At that point, it was like, I really got it. And the business of photography is not well enough known to people. And, I used to tell, some of the students, go talk to your old man who's running a store over in Brooklyn, and he'll tell you how to do this. Because, a lot of people just don't get like the idea that this is real business.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do
if
now.
Yeah, if you spend money on something and you charge the same amount, you're losing money. Money costs money.
Right.
My brother's a CPA. He always told me more businesses go out of business because of a lack of capital rather than a lack of work.
Sorry.
And a lot of people don't understand that. Hey, how many guys used messenger services a lot? I remember
Oh,
during
yeah.
that time, I depended heavily on personal messenger and became
Yeah.
really good friends with the guys. And they would deliver stuff too, that beyond just stuff. If you were in need of
What sort of
recreational stuff.
stuff?
Yeah,
I worked with En route. Do you remember anybody work with En route?
I remember it.
It's
Yeah.
all legal now, Jack.
I got a messenger story if you want to hear it. I was shooting for a client called the Bag Lab, and the creative director was Pam Love, right? And of course, I'm Bob Kiss. And who would have thunk it? We were shooting on some ads for her on Valentine's Day, right? So I would shoot a big Polaroid and I would messenger it up. This is before the internet. This is like 80 something early. And she would look at it and, make notes and messenger it back. Right. Eventually, the messenger service started saying, okay, we're not doing this anymore. You guys are pulling our legs. Love to kiss, kiss to love, Valentine's Day. Dead serious. My manager, Claude, had to say, listen, we've paid your bills. We're real. Her name. They had to explain because they thought we were joking with it. Anyhow, there's a messenger story.
I
Who
think
had the-
starting that by just saying messenger was probably enough to say that, yeah, I think there's a certain level of intelligence that maybe is not necessarily met.
Or lack thereof.
But who has
Or-
stories about messengers opening the film box to see the photos that they're taking
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
lab?
Oh God, thank God,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, that was me. I told that one at this group before. It wasn't happened to me, but I heard about it. They were shooting lingerie somewhere, and Messenger walked in and saw the lingerie models and everything. And they were shooting 4x5 or something, or 8x10. I don't know what it was, but it was enough to go into a box. And they gave it to him to rush to the lab because they needed it right away
Oh,
to make a
God.
deadline. And he left the studio and he wanted to see the pictures of the semi-naked girls. So he opened the box to take a look at the pictures of unprocessed film.
Oh,
And that's-
did you
and
get
that's-
compensated? I mean, that's going to cost, yeah.
Is that a problem?
Not in digital.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So
Okay,
Newman,
can
what are
I
your,
just
some of your,
toss in a?
yeah,
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to toss into a early, and I'd love to hear other people's stories of early photo district. When you were first there, we all were there for its evolution and its, what's the right word? Dissemination. It's dissolution, if that's the right word. But
Yeah,
I'd like to share one.
dissemination.
Yeah, like I said, I moved into that studio April 1st, 76. It was an empty loft. It had been a sweatshop where they made uniforms, right? So I get up the first morning and, there's nothing there. And no kitchen, nothing. So I figure, okay, we're doing stand-up baths, right? I'm going to go over to Irving Place where there was like a coffee shop. And I'm on my way over. I'm walking across 19th, or maybe I went down to 18th. And all of a sudden, I almost trip over a body that is outlined in chalk because there used to be a rehab center somewhere in that area. This is before coffee, 7 a.m., summer, spring day. And I'm like in Spacey land. And I literally almost trip over a body. That used to happen on the average once a week in 1976, in 1976 in the photo district, or at least in that area, because they were all overdoses. There was a rehab center and not everybody made it through. I just would love to hear other people in your early days in photo district. What was it like then?
Well, it wasn't the photo district, but I remember in 76, 77, I was on 16th Street and 3rd Avenue. I lived. and somebody got mugged, and a cop came by himself, and the cop said, did he run below 14th Street, the mugger? And somebody said, yeah, and he said he doesn't go below 14th Street unless he has somebody with him. He says, and once they get below 14th Street, forget it. He said they just disappear. That
Well,
was
it
a
wasn't-
lesson.
Yeah, it wasn't just done in the photo district. In '76, I moved to New York and got an apartment at 79th in Amsterdam. And as I was moving in, there was a group talking about the Chinese laundry next door, where a dismembered policeman's body had been discovered in their garbage can.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
How
As
how
I'm
do we get
moving in.
into this topic? Let's go back to photos. Remember back then, B and H was a little store on 17th Street. They've come
Yeah.
a long way since.
And I lived
Adorama was
across
down
from
there
there
too.
too. Yeah, I
What's
lived
that?
across them on 17th on the west side. That was with
Right.
an RIT grad, Scott North. I helped him build his loft. That was my first roommate. And yeah, we're right across the street from B&H, little tiny store.
The whole thing with the photo district was all about rent. I think it's all about rents, which is why it kind of migrated. You found loft space, a lot of square footage for very little money, and you had to rehab it and you had to build it. But photographers moved in, and then the models started to come, and then their rich boyfriends started to come, and that made the neighborhood too expensive.
The restaurants.
Right.
How many guys were at the protest, the flash-in we had when the prices were going up? That was like 83 or 84.
That really helped us out a lot, Jack.
Yeah,
Was that ASMP sponsored event?
No, the model maker, I thought, was the one who organized it. There was a model maker.
Trengove?
No. Oh God, he was a friend of mine, and he was in also at 568 Broadway. Mark Yerkew.
Oh, Mark, yeah, I remember.
Right.
Mark Yerkew. Oh, there were some good stories with him. He was a little strange. There was another assistant who, God, I went to school with another RIT grad who was like one of his best friends. The guy used to be a cab driver in Boston before he went to RIT. I forgot his name. Mark Yerkew and his wife and this guy and his girlfriend, I think it was, all went up way north to Mark's house, way up north. And what happened is while they were up there, the four of them drove up. This other guy and Mark's wife told the other two that they were having an affair. I said, I always wanted to know what that ride back to New York was like with the four of them.
Oh, jeez.
I got a Mark Yerkew story. Mark, I used to work for a still life guy. His name was Hashi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I
And
remember.
Mark, and we were doing some cosmetics campaign, and Mark had.
Did he ever make
sculpted-
it?
What's that?
Did Hashi ever make it
I mean, did he ever make it?
in the business?
He was huge.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Tongue in cheek.
so okay, so Mark had to sculpt this lipstick, right? And he made one, and we had it on the set in Hashi's studio. And Mark was standing in the background there chatting with the art director. And it, doing a still, I said, you're moving lights around, the modeling lights in the banks and the strobes and stuff are on. And it got really warm. And I had a little white card that I was attempting to angle down and tape it to a brick to anchor it in there. And I dropped the card, and it hit the lipstick, which was melting. I mean, it was still solid, but when the card hit it, it was over. And Mark comes up to me and starts to yell and scream at me about what a fucking idiot I am. And Hashi, who was a little guy, jumps in between us, and he's poking his finger at Mark, says, "Don't you fucking yell at my assistant. I'll fucking kill you." It was fabulous.
I like it.
Yeah. Mark had a temper. I remember the one big job he did for me was for a photomatic. We had to have a wheat field grow in a kitchen, from nothing, just keep going up. I think it was 10 grand to get a wheat field in a little small set. Looked good.
He was a great model maker.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. He was a great
So
model maker.
Stephen Wilkes has joined us. Stephen, do you have audio?
Yes. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Stephen.
Stephen.
Hey.
So
How
if
are
people
you?
don't know Stephen, he came into the photo district around 1979 also. Is that, and you worked for Jay Maisel,
That's right. That's
and you've
right.
got that great movie out.
Thank you. Jay myself.
Jay
Yeah.
Myself, yeah.
Brilliant film. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So, yeah, sorry I'm joining a little late, but
No, that's fine. Why don't you give a little more introduction to yourself here to people that might not know you?
oh, well, I'm a photographer, fine artist. I've been working, gosh, since I was taking pictures since I was about 12 years old. So it's my kind of my life's work. And I was lucky enough to meet Jay when probably 1978, 79. And I was able to, I met him, I called him up, called on the phone, and he answered the phone, which happens once every million years. And that led to me dropping my portfolio off down at the Bowery on Spring Street in the Bowery. I'd really never spent much time down there. And I remember walking into the building and just being completely overwhelmed. I thought it was, I'd never believed anything like that ever could exist in New York City, let alone be owned by one person. And so it was the beginning of what became a long friendship, him being my mentor for many years. I mean, we know each other over 40 years now. And I think the time I remember there, what was so extraordinary about, I started to work for him in the summer of 79 while I was still in college. And so I used to commute from Long Island, and I would drive into work, and I'd get in by 8 a.m. And I used to go down the Spring Street, and there was a little a trattoria on the corner, and I would have coffee. And Louise Nevelson, the great sculptor, would be in there every morning also having an espresso, and she'd be at a table far away. And I was also struck by her. At first, I didn't really know who she was, and then I slowly found out. Oh my God, and I remember it was just an amazing time to be down there. There were so many interesting artists, and particularly graffiti. And Jay used to comment when I started working for him. He said, "Listen, if you see this guy doing this barking dog stuff on the sidewalk, you got to make sure you tell him to use paint, not chalk. I really like those drawings, but he always uses chalk." So and so
Keith Haring?
Yeah, Keith Haring. That was Keith Haring. And Jean-Michel Bisquat was doing Samo. He was writing the Samo phrasing on the bank during that time period when I was there. So that was just like part of the thing that was going on. Then you had CBGBs across the street, so, and for me, just going to work was an adventure because I would I'd get there very early. I would never go in too early because Jay didn't like it if I came in too early. And when I'd go into the building, it was great. And I always felt safe, in the morning. But at night, after I, pick up the film and I'd set up his film and I'd end up looking at all his film, I would end up leaving and heading home at about 11 o'clock at night, sometimes 11:30. And that's when it was scary down there, because it was like a night of the living dead. It seemed like suddenly the whole place would come alive, with all these like very strange, people. And
The Bowery.
The Bowery, yeah. So that was
Right.
The Bowery was an amazing place at that point. I compare it to actually the way Berlin kind of is now, the scene in Berlin, the art scene, especially a few years ago even. That period of the late 70s in the Bowery was really special.
I remember there were a lot of artists up in the northern part of the photo district, let's not forget that Andy Warhol's factory was on Broadway and 17th Street.
18th Street by the park.
Right.
Right. And then also right next door, right on the corner of 19th, was that big dance studio. What's the name of the guy in White Nights, the famous dancer? He had his.
Oh God.
He had his. No.
Hines and Dad, Gregory Hines.
Gregory Hines, exactly. He had a studio there, and I almost literally bumped into him once coming out my door. There were a lot of arts in that area. It was pretty amazing, and of course, with Warhol's studio there were people coming and going all the time. That was one of the few places. Speaking of messengers, where I didn't use one. That was one of the few places where I tried, whenever I wasn't shooting, to deliver my own prints. I wouldn't send an assistant and I wouldn't use a messenger because I'd go up there, Bridget would scowl at me, open the door, and I'd go in, I'd be walking down the long hall the way to Interview magazine, And Andy would look up and go, "Oh, Bob, have you met Jean-Michel?" Is Basquiat, "Oh, Bob, you know Halston, don't you?" And he would introduce you to whoever he was talking to on your way by. I mean, it was just that sort of focus of fame. It was right there in that corner. It's a pretty weird place.
You got to remember one thing, the history of the photo district goes way back. Brady had a place on 12th, I think it was, in Broadway.
You talking about Matthew Brady?
Yeah.
Did you assist for him too, Bill?
Yeah.
Did you assist him too?
On and off. But no, there was a lot of, there was a lot of photography that was in that area, and that was a more socialized area. I can't remember the theater that was there, but that was kind of like the nexus for a lot of the history of, and I want to say it's, down 10th and whatever. I've been going to New York City. I live in Rutherford, and Rutherford's closest, nicest place to New York City. And my dad used to work at the Seagram building, and he would say, "Get on the bus and I'll meet you in the Port Authority." And that's when I was 6 and 7 years old. So I always thought I was a New Yorker. Whenever anyone asked me, where are you from? I'd say, well, I'm from like the New York area.
Nobody ever heard of Rutherford.
Yeah, right. But Fairleigh Dickinson and William Carlos Williams and those guys.
We used to call it fairly ridiculous.
I was born
Not
in
anymore.
Brooklyn.
They're not here anymore.
I was born in Brooklyn and grew up in Jersey, but my dad worked for the Transit Authority and token booths in the subways. So I was always knew all the subways and was considered a New Yorker my whole time too.
Yeah,
Well,
I never in my life ever had any kind of problems whatsoever, and I've been in some really bad places, in every borough, and it's saying the evolution of our photo district and the history of photography is very much endemic to the history of New York City, and it really I do a lot of history.
Oh, that's your next book right there.
I've got 3 out already.
I'm saying that's your next one.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. I'd love to actually have had some kind of a museum for when you consider it, the photo district was really the center of the entire world in so many ways for our industry. There wasn't really too much else that you could say that had the breadth and the talent that was in the photo district.
It's such a concentrated area.
Talk about being a 6-year-old. When I was, I guess, just about eighth grade, I think, I went to school 2 days a week. The other 3 days, I would cut class. I'd go to homeroom. They'd take attendance. I'd be marked in, get on the subway, go downtown, and hang around at places like Camera Barn, Olden, Willoughby Peerless, Mini,
Bomsey.
Bomsey was a little farther downtown at 17th Street. But the bottom line was there was so many great camera stores. I used to hang around and drool at the showcases, and
Sure, Willoughby's on 31st Street, across the street from Spiritone and Executive Camera.
So
And there was Shopfer, the taxidermist there.
Wow.
Yeah.
With the glass eyes and the
That's right.
tigers and lions in the window.
Yeah, New York City had the greatest diversity of not only supplies, manufacturing, services, but they had us. We were all pretty much dedicated to doing this. I'm still taking a lot of pictures. I'm looking at the sky right now because I got a ton of commercial real estate I got to shoot, and I'm thinking like I should be bugging out and taking those pictures instead of hanging out with you people.
Tomorrow's a nicer day.
Oh,
Hey,
thank
one of
you.
the stories I remember was an assistant named John. I can't remember his last name. I went to school with him. He was Richard Horowitz's studio manager for a while, and he didn't have an apartment. He couldn't afford one for a while. He was like between places. So he used to live in Richard's studio, but Richard never knew it. He would get there early in the morning. I mean, he'd wake up early in the morning because he knew when Richard was coming in. And he'd go out and get coffee and a roll, and he'd come back and like meet Richard, who, quote, beat him to the studio. and then he would just, when Richard left at night, he would just bring his sleeping bag out and go to sleep, whatever.
Shower? Was there a shower?
I don't remember if Richard's studio had a shower or not. But I don't think John cared. He probably would wash up in the darkroom sink,
And
That
they've
would
done
fix
that.
them up.
But but in those days too, I had a Tracyak, Erwin Tracyak, known as Tracy. He, I was a roommate with him for a while. His first apartment was down on the Lower East Side. He was paying $100 a month, and this would have been '76. And and I saw the apartment, and yeah, $100 was about the right price. You had to go through another building, through another courtyard. Nothing was level. Everything was at an angle in the apartment because everything had settled. And it was a small apartment, but $100. He lived in Manhattan.
So a few of the
Yeah,
people
do
here
that anymore.
either went to or taught at or graduated from RIT. And there was also a bunch of folks, the other group of assistants used to come from Brooks. And I used to see it as sort of a rivalry between them. A lot of all of Richard Avedon's assistants came out of Brooks just about. How did you guys feel, the RIT folks? Did you notice that rivalry with Brooks?
Not really. We had no reason to worry about them.
Actually, the biggest West Coast competitor was Art Center.
In LA.
Those guys
It's
all
true.
have great portfolios, all the art.
It's
centers.
true. The art center was
They
very
all
good.
have great
I
portfolios.
got to lecture there a couple times when I used to shoot out there. They had their act together. They were pretty impressive.
Brooks was a little bit like button-down shirts and kind of straight arrow, kind of goofy people.
But they had good.
Well, I mean,
Brooks was
compared to-
like the Navy. It's like being in the Navy. All my friends who went to Brooks, they all told me it was like being in the Navy because Brooks was an old Navy guy.
But
At RIT, I
I
was
went
in the
to
photo
school at,
engineering program, and there just was nothing to compete with that anywhere in the country. So we never really cared about Brooks in the photo engineering program.
I went to college at FIT on West 27th Street. And
Wow.
And I remember, so that's Photo District. World's greatest free show, by the way. If you're ever depressed, just go to 227 West 27th Street, sit on the steps and watch the kids go by for a while. It'll snap you out of it. But I went in there and Billy, talk about teaching people to learn to be assistants. The first day we had orientation and they're telling us, and by the time you graduate, you'll be qualified to be an assistant or a stylist. I'm thinking to myself, WTF, I don't want to be anybody's assistant. I want to go work for Life magazine and cover wars and stuff. But the funniest part was that the guy who was the chairman of the photo department was a guy by the name of Irving Schill. And he used to photograph the back cover of Mad magazine. He did all those ad parodies. And I thought that when it said photo by Irving Schill, that was a name that somebody made up so he wouldn't be recognized. Right? I walk in and this guy says, I'm Irving Schill and blah, 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 blah. And I had him my first semester. I said, wait a minute, are you the same guy that does Mad magazine? He says to me, yeah, that's me. And I'm like, okay. And the guy constantly mispronounced my name for like
Pobereskin.
years.
I remember that.
He said, hey, Pobereskin, how you doing?
Yeah, Josabella went there too, didn't he?
Yeah, Paul was there. Yeah, he was in the next class. He was 1 year behind me.
Yeah, Paul and I shared a studio on 245 West 29th Street on the 12th floor.
Yeah.
And I think Paul may still be there. That studio is used now by Adorama for a lot of their educational stuff. I remember watching a video one day and saying that place looks really familiar. And we went around the corner and there's a safe in the corner built in because it was a Furrier before ours. And finally I called them, Paul, and said, yep, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I got to clarify the assistance thing. Here's the way this actually worked out is that we all had, many of the assistants in New York organized into the assistance project committee. Chad Weckler was one of, the head guys. And Joe, you were definitely there. Ken, you were there, and the reality is that we were trying to just get some recognition from ASMP. But the thing was, is when ASMP had that beautiful headquarters,
05 Lexington Avenue. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually started this idea that we should have an education committee. And we did that. And I think Chris Denny he went over to SVA and said, you know what, we'd like to be like associated with you guys a little bit. Now, Chris did that for about a year or so. And then he finally came up to me because we were best buddies. And he said, I can't do this anymore. You can probably do this. And so many different things came out of that assistance projects committee. And I did have a lot of success actually teaching people how to.
You just mention one thing about that. Because, I know you and Cornicello and Bill Newman and Ken Rosenberg. You are Bill Newman, sorry. All those guys and Paul and Dennis Connors, right? Everybody was involved with that group. Yeah. But you got to give props to a guy by the name of Harvey Lloyd. Without Harvey, we'd have never existed because he was the only photographer in New York who treated his assistants decently. And
hey,
that's
wait
really
a minute.
Well, yeah, no, I was going to say, Jack actually, I think, had a lot to do with us organizing, didn't you, Jack?
Well, APA started the assistant weekend workshop, and it was done at my studio and Barry O'Rourke's because we were across the hall. So we later.
Yeah, that was previous to that, though. I think that you were on ASMP or you were, on the board or what have you. And I think that you might have given us the key to the clubhouse or something along those lines.
I was on ASMP board for a short time, but I don't quite remember. I remember the APA Assistance Weekend because that was a fun thing to do.
Sure.
That was Jay used to come for that. I still remember somebody asking him, Jay, how much do you bracket your shots? And he said, when I can, from one end of the lens to the other.
and that's what he would do, literally.
Yeah.
The lens. We used to call it every known exposure. Yeah,
I'd heard those stories, but never knew if that was true. So, well, thank you.
I remember shooting with him in a helicopter, and to keep up with Jay, we had 4, sometimes 5 cameras, and he would literally shoot hand down on high speed, the fastest that the F or the F2, whatever he was using at the time, and he would just go like this, empty within like 3-4 seconds, loading up.
Yeah, but if you're shooting color chrome 25, at the time there was no pushing, no pulling.
Oh no! Listen,
right?
There was a reason. It wasn't.
If you used a meter, then your shadows were too dark.
He wasn't. It really wasn't about that, Joseph. It was about what he was interested in. Actually, what I discovered as I looked at his film, he was seeing highlights the way painters do.
Yeah.
And so what it was doing was by underexposing, he would bring the shadows much more down, and since certain other things would come forward, and he would discover relationships that he would never see if he just exposed naturally. So that's why he was doing it, so it was less about. At first I thought he was just maybe just doesn't know.
Well, he told me one day, he says, "There's no right exposure." He says, "There's the exposure the meter tells you, and there's what exposure the camera tells you."
Exactly.
But that may not be the right exposure for what you're shooting.
Yeah.
The other great piece of advice Jay gave me was he told me one day, he says, remember this, he says, no matter what you're shooting, it's really important. Turn around and look at what's going on behind you. It might be more interesting.
Yeah, always.
And he was right. I made one of my favorite pictures that way.
Yeah, that's so
following that bit of advice. And
when
the hell out of it.
Stephen, when you ask him what his favorite f-stop is, what he says?
All of them?
His favorite f-stop?
I know what his favorite lens is, but I don't know his favorite f-stop, I have to say.
It's FU.
That's perfect.
So what was his favorite lens?
He had this 90 millimeter. I don't even know who made the lens. It doesn't it has this strange, it looked like it'd been through the Civil War. But it had this strange halation, and it was just, I remember that was something that he liked to carry around a lot. But but always, the every known exposure, that was the scariest thing of trying to assist Jay, was actually in a helicopter trying to keep up with him. And I'll tell one story where I really was, this was my first trip in a helicopter with him. And we were shooting over North Carolina during the peak of fall foliage, and a bird, it was a hawk, I think, came flying adjacent to the chopper over the fall foliage. And Jay, at that time, he'd always we had the door off and he had a dry cigar in his mouth. You know, he couldn't obviously have a lit cigar in a chopper, but he had the dry one in his mouth and he's literally just going camera. And I was trained to always count frames. So I'd go 34, 35, 36, and then he keeps going 37, 38, 39. Now my stomach is dropping because I realize that, oh shit, there's a problem. The film is not loading or it's not grabbing. And so I basically, at that moment, I start undoing my seatbelt because I'm getting ready to jump out of the helicopter because I realized whatever he's just shot, he doesn't have. He thinks he has it, but he doesn't have it. So I quickly grab a camera and I go, here, another camera. And he's like, and you know, Jay has this look when he knows that you fucked up. Like he knows you're trying to hide it, but he knows you did it. And he always said to me that I was the kind of assistant that he never had to really scream at me because he knew I was on the verge of committing harikari anyway. So there was no use in saying anything to me because I was already jumping out of the chopper. And so he gives me this look, and you know, I'm like, seriously, I'm so sick over this thing. But that was my first great experience with him, and every known exposure and trying to keep up with him was an incredible challenge. Yeah,
Stephen, he does the best Stephen Wilkes impression I've ever heard, by the way.
Well, you know, I listen, man. Look, Jack, don't fucking tell me. You know, I use the word as an adjective. Okay, it's really the way I am.
And you know his worst.
The kid.
Yeah, the kid. Do you know the worst story he talks about, that endless roll of film that never caught on what he was shooting when he didn't shoot?
What?
Sammy Davis Jr. and Marilyn Monroe.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I didn't feel too bad because he did that one himself. He didn't have an assistant in those days.
Yeah.
He told me that was the greatest picture he never got. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, you can only imagine. Because that's when he was, you know, those days, that's when he shot the mile shot. That's when, you know, he was, you know, running around all these jazz clubs and stuff and doing stuff. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, his jazz stuff's incredible. I think.
Well, you know,
people know about that.
Yeah, the black and white work, you know, many people never really saw. And when I used to work for Jay, and then he made me his associate, he put me up into you know, the fourth floor where you know, the great painter used to work, who oh my god,
pop art, not pop.
The pop artist, yeah, the pop artist.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I can't remember his name now.
Peter Max?
No.
No.
I mean, this guy was way bigger than Peter Max. I mean, he's like, I said to Jay when Jay had a bronze nameplate on the fourth floor. And Jay always had it turned upside down. Like I go, why? He goes, wow, man, it's a long story. But he was renting the floor from Jay, which was 5,000 square feet for $300 a month. And, you know, it was crazy. But what ended up happening was I used to stay in that floor all the time. And the room Jay put me in, turns out that was all his black and white prints, which nobody ever saw. And so I used to, you know, be in there all the time, and I started going through all these orange Agfa boxes and seeing incredible stuff. And I actually, I remember at the time I was with Peter Fetterman and in LA, and Peter was starting to represent Jay, and he was interested in Jay, and he said, well, what's he doing? You know, what's he doing with his pictures? I mean, is he doing anything? I said, no, you know, he sells everything through his own space and stuff. But I said, he's got this incredible body of black and white work that nobody's ever seen. He goes, are you kidding me? Oh, I said, it's like Robert Frank. I mean, it's incredible stuff from the 50s. And through that whole thing, we ended up, you know, Peter came down there, showed it to Peter, and I showed it to Jay, and Jay said, he acquiesced and said, well, you know, we should do a book on this. And that's what Peter wanted to do. And that's what we ended up doing. So that's how that work actually came about, was because he stuck me in this room and had no idea that I'd be going through his orange boxes, but it was something special to unearth, you know, and it was all from the 50s, all black and white stuff. Yeah.
I know some of the assistants, you know, we talk about working with photographers who'd hire another assistant at a cheaper rate to pack for them on some jobs. And I've shown up on jobs missing equipment because the photographer hired someone for $25 less the day before to pack the equipment for the trip. And when we get there, I'm missing a camera back or something like that. I don't know if you have other war stories like that, or working with the Ascor strobe systems.
But the sun guns, you mean?
Yeah.
You could kill yourselves with those things.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Henry Wolf had one with, a huge overhead light box. Yeah, and those things always, every time it went off was,
Well, you blew into
you
those
saw you.
packs.
It was a sun pack.
It was incredible.
It was a
loud.
sun pack.
But I had a story where I was the assistant and I packed up for a shoot in Central Park, and it was Dynalites, and they had those round AC cords that fit into them. They were unlike anything else. I forgot to pack any AC cords, and we're in the middle of Central Park with a generator. And it was a big shoot with a location van and the whole thing. And the photographer just looked at me because there was no time to go back to the studio to get it. I said, no problem, I'll get it working. And so I stripped off the end of an extension cord and hot wired it to the pack, just the bare cords. And that's how we got through the shoot.
Jack, I used to work for Bill Stetner. I was his first assistant.
You have my sympathies.
Thank you. And that guy could string, he was from the Bronx. He could string obscenities together like nobody's business. That was truly his greatest talent. But we got all packed up to go on location. We got everything loaded in the truck, and he was going to drive. He had a Mercedes 450 SL at the time, convertible, and we were going to go out. We were going to some state on Long Island to shoot. And I said, Bill, let me just go upstairs and eyeball the studio and just make sure that we didn't miss anything. And I go upstairs, second floor. So I go up the stairs and I walk in the studio, pick up the camera case and take it back to the car. And he looks at me. I almost forgot the cameras and everything else.
Been there, done that.
Jay has a great
look, and he unleashed a string of obscenities at me, but he was happy I found it.
Jay has a great story of him and Stetner, where they were both up for the same job. Do you know this one, Stephen?
I know this story.
Well, do you guys, were you there, Jack, when Jay had the big meeting in the bank, when work for hire was starting, people giving away starting to give away rights, and he brought everybody in, and Stetner was doing all the big cigarette campaigns and stuff. And I'll never forget it because Stetner stood up and basically said, this is bullshit, man. If we don't do it, then they'll go next. And that was the end of the meeting. It was like, we weren't trying to make a union. We were just trying to come together as like a group and say, this is, we need to protect each other and like protect what is going to be the future of this business. And, Jay was so prescient in terms of what was happening at that time. And it certainly happened quickly. But John, I don't want to interrupt your story, Jack. Go for it.
Yeah, it was, they were both up for the same job. And Jay called Stetner and said, Bill, what are you bidding on this? He said, I don't want to tell you what I'm bidding. And she said, no, go ahead, blah, 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 whatever it was. Jay gets the job. And then he runs into Bill, and Bill asks him the question. I'm going to screw this story up a little bit. If you know it, Joseph, you can straighten it out. But basically, Jay looked at Bill and said, yeah, I underbid you. And
no, he didn't. He overbid. He said, I didn't want to underbid you.
No. That is what he did. He overbid Bill.
Right.
But he told Bill initially that he underbid him.
Right.
Just to get Bill to get off.
Bill didn't want to tell him what he was thinking of charging for the fee because he didn't want Jay to underbid and get the job. What Jay did was, when Bill finally told him, I forget what the number was, $15,000 or something. I forget what it is. Doesn't matter. So Jay came in at 20, and he got the job. And Bill was cursing him up and down. Son of a gun, he underbid me, blah, 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 blah. And I mentioned this to Jay, I don't know, several years later. He says to me, no. He says, I came in much more expensive than Bill. I told the art director, you don't want the cheap guy. The more expensive guy is the one you want.
I like it.
Yeah, but he told Bill originally when they first met and that he underbid him just to get Bill to go off. And he did. And then he told him, no, I overbid you. Yeah, I pissed off Jay once. we were at dinner at one of the conventions in Vegas or something, and Jay was starting to tell one of his stories, and the way he was starting, and I said, Jay, let me tell it. I like my version better. Oh, did that piss him off? I knew the story.
Any chance? I'd love to hear some other stories of people who have had entertaining experiences, not as assistants, but with assistants. And if you don't mind, I'll start with a quick one.
Yeah.
We were going up to Greenwich, Connecticut to photograph Yvonne Lendl, the tennis pro, at his mansion up there. And we had all the equipment carefully laid out, and I had 2 assistants. And so we loaded the car and away we went. And I get up there, and so I said to Ernie, the chief assistant, I say, okay, let's get out the Gitzo, let's set it up. And he comes back with looking very pale. And he says, it's not there. So I borrowed the phone, called the studio, and Chloe, my manager, said, yeah, it's right here on the floor where all the other gear was. It's where it was supposed to be. They just didn't bring it. So I got my nice ELM and my 120 lens and my lights, everything's set up, and no tripod. So then I thought to myself, these old stands of mine, they have that larger thread, and the ELM had both sides sockets. So I screw the sucker in there, and I figure I'm using strobe, I'm shooting it at 200s, I'm okay, at least gonna hold it still enough, and the art director can peek through. But, I sort of flexed it and shot with a light stand instead of a tripod. Now, the art director gave me a sidelong glance. I did one of those very small head shakes, meaning don't ask. But and then I found the same assistant who happened to forget the tripod, also happened to grab 2 used Yvonne Lendl limited edition tennis rackets from the practice, the little shower house right next to Lendl's tennis courts. You can imagine that I was not amused.
Wow.
We won't go any further with names, but thank God Lendl said nothing. He probably had so many he didn't even notice. But that doesn't make you feel good, I mean, that could have roasted my cojones right there. That could have gotten me nella merda profunda. So
well, it's not an assistant thing. It's myself. I forgot the tripod once and did the same thing. Put my 4x5 on top of a light stand, screwed it in, and then just dropped front to get the angle I needed on the shot.
That'll work.
One of the great things I learned as an assistant working for other guys is you have to have a checklist. And if you had everything checked on the checklist, you wouldn't forget anything.
But I had a checklist.
So I developed it. So when I opened my business, I developed a checklist that my assistants could use to make sure we had all the gear. And I even had a checklist for myself, my personal stuff, and I'd pack before I left the house, and, we'd go off to the airport. At one point I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, photographing for a Japanese magazine. And we get to the hotel, and my assistant's is in his room. He's got all the gear, and I'm unpacking my suitcase, and I realized, despite the fact that I had a checklist, that I had everything I needed except underwear.
What do you need underwear for? I got one. This is kind of funny because I was working for Jay, and he, as his assistant, and he decided he wanted me to scout for him. It was my first big scouting project for Jay. It was a cigarette campaign, and it was these cigarettes. We were building a huge model on a dock, and he needed a perfectly still lake. And I found a lake up in up the Merritt Parkway. It was called Stillwater Lake. And I scouted it, and
fiendishly deceptive.
Listen, it was honestly, it was exactly like the drawing in the layout. It was insane how perfect it was. Pristine lake, no houses on it, just this perfect undulating hills in the distance, beautiful foliage. Perfect. I got a view of it from one rock, and I shot all the pictures with that 18mm Nikkor that I had at the time. Come back, show Jay the pictures. He goes, oh my God, kid, this is fantastic, man. It's perfect, Stephen. We're going to go do this. Let's do this. They love it. The art director loves it. Everybody was going out there. We go out to Stillwater Lake, and I hiked through this huge trail to get to this one rock I shot on. So I get to the rock, and he goes, where the fuck are we going, man? What are you doing? Where is this place? I got to bring a dock here. And he's complaining. And all of a sudden we get to the rock, and he goes, holy shit, man. This is it. It's perfect. I go, yeah. He goes, do you know how deep it is? I go, no. He goes, well, jump into the water and see how deep it is. So the water's about 55 degrees. I jump in. I can't, I'm too buoyant. I can't, like, he goes, take this stick, and he throws a tree in, and I'm literally, he wants me to try to dip the tree in the water to find out how deep before he can say. So I'm now trying to wrestle with this anaconda tree that's, 5 times more buoyant than I am. And the whole thing is insanity. And now I'm starting to shake and tremble and all this stuff. I'm like, hypothermia is coming through me. He finally realizes, you know what? Building the dock's not going to work. They're going to create floaties to float the dock. I come out of the water and he goes, man, and I'm like shaking. He goes, I just don't get the same view that you have in your picture. What lens did you use? And I go, 18 millimeter. He goes, shit, I don't have an 18 millimeter. I go, where's your 18 millimeter? I said, it's back in my house in Long Island. He goes, can you go back to your house now and go get the lens? So I literally drove all the way. This is on the shoot day, drove all the way back to my house in Long Island, turned around, drove all the way back with the lens, got there. It had been terrible weather the whole day. As soon as I got there, the clouds start parting, the lake gets calm, everything happens, and he makes the picture. And that was my big assistant screw up, but I was able to save it.
Sure did. Boy,
Anyway.
I expected the Red Sea to part too. You were
Did you rent the lens to him?
I lent the lens to him. Yes, I did.
You should have rented it to him.
Huh?
You should have
Did you rent it to him?
Did I rent it? No, man, I'm not fucking renting it.
No, just kidding.
Those are the days everybody lent stuff to each other.
Yeah, you
Those
lent to
days.
each other.
I remember borrowing stuff and lending stuff to other photographers.
Yeah, I think when I worked for Gottlieb, he used to send me up to your place to get things all the time.
Oh God, whatever happened to Dennis?
I have no idea.
He got me one of my best clients at the time, Reader's Digest, the direct mail group, because he shot still life and I shot people, and they were looking for a people person. That account helped me build my studio in Soho. But yeah,
'cause
Dennis was
He
a
was at
strange one.
14th and Broadway,
Yeah.
across the
Somebody
street
told
from
me that they
Elizabeth.
would. Was it you who said he opened up a drawer once on his desk and there were all these undeposited checks that he got?
No, not me. Though that would want to understand why he was always slow at paying.
No, it's the one thing after assisting, I always paid my assistants. And I had one assistant, I remember who it is, I'm not going to say, but she dropped one of my Hasselblad lenses at the time before I went to Mamiya. And she just looked at me and she said, I'll pay you for the repair. And I looked at her and I said, you don't make enough. Because I paid her, I knew what I was paying her. I said, listen, and this is something I said when I was an assistant to someone. I said, when you share in the profits, then you'll share in the losses. But at this point, I'll take care of the lens. And I got that as a photographer because I had to say that to somebody as an assistant who wanted me to pay. I was second director on a TV shoot. And I ordered lunch and it was like $100, and I tipped the guy $15 who delivered it. And the guy's rep said, oh no, why'd you do that? You didn't get an approval. He said, it's going to come out of your pay. And that's the first time I said, when I share in the profits, I'll share in these expenses, but no, I'm not paying for anything. But I got to tell you, my assistants were great to me. If you were good to your assistants, boy, your assistants just bend over backwards to you. And I heard so many horror stories about one assistant who showed up at a place and was so abused that when lunchtime came, he said, I'm going out for lunch. He said, no, I'll bring in lunch in. He said, no, I'm going out for lunch, and just never came back.
Sure.
Sure. I don't know who that assistant was, but I give him props.
I've been on jobs where assistants said to me, listen, man, this is not good. And you know that, and you should leave with me because I'm gone. And that was in Ohio, just like, all right, I gotta be here, man. But, if you feel that way, good. I've had guys, smack me, not smack me, but, like hit me, push me around. Cameras thrown at me for sure. And this is not because of me. It's because of like the problems that we're having on set that I had no control over. However, you know.
Sure,
it was a
sure, Bill,
subject
you
of
had no
some-
control. Yeah, it wasn't your fault at all.
No,
Sure,
not-
no.
I will say some names and you'd go, yeah, I know that one.
You know, Grant Peterson used to work for Tony Petroselli.
Oh my God.
Everybody remember Tony?
I used to work for Grant.
And I was working for Klaus Luca, and one day Klaus abruptly fired me. Had nothing to do with me. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into it. But I called Grant on the phone. I said, "You won't believe what just happened to me." He said, "Why?" I said, "I just got fired." He said, "Klaus fired you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, come down here. I can use an extra hand for a few days." And Tony was shooting at the time, cigarette campaigns were segregated. So he was shooting the black Salem campaign or something like that. Anyway, it was in the studio. He had this set built. It was supposed to be some ski lodge. He had models. And he was getting a little bit exasperated. He was running out of ideas. And what he would do when he needed a break, he would pick on an assistant. And he said to Grant, what role are we on? And Grant looks at me and says, "Joe, what role are we on?" And I said, 22. And Tony says, "You fucking guys, do I have to teach you fucking guys how to count film?" I said, "Tony, it's 22. He says, "I shot 3 variations." I said, "Oh, okay. Variation 3, roll 6. And Tony says, "Was that too fucking hard?" He's whacking himself in the face. And there was another assistant who said, "Tony, leave him alone." And Tony looks at this guy and he says, his name was Jim something rather. I don't remember his last name. He says, "I heard you're in the Army."
Oh, no. Trace. That was my roommate.
Okay.
Erwin Tracy.
So I heard you were in the Army. What the
He was
fuck
in
did they teach you
Vietnam.
in the Army? And this guy looks at Tony and says, "They taught me how to kill." And Tony
Yeah, that was
fired him on
Trace. No, didn't fire him on the spot, but
Fired
that
him
was the
later.
end- he
At the
fired
end
him
of
after that.
Yeah.
No, that was Tracy, Erwin Tracy.
That was
my
your roommate.
You know? Yeah,
was-
and
that was-
he was a Vietnam vet. He was the one who
Yeah,
had the
he was a Vietnam
$100.
vet. Exactly right.
Yeah, he was. He had the $100 a month room, and then we roomed on 17th and 3rd that he had for a long time. His wife used to work for. She was a stylist eventually, but she used to work for the Still Life guy, God, on 5th Avenue and 21st Street, who had the thing with his wife selling white plates and white dinnerware.
Charlie Gold?
Charlie
Gold.
Charlie
Yeah.
Gold. Yeah, his wife used to work for Charlie Gold. That's one of the ways I knew Charlie. That was an interesting story. But yeah, Petroselli was, I knew that story from way back. The other one, the Petroselli, was just a good business person. He said Trace told me once he walked in once and he had some little job that was paying like $600 or $800 or something. And all these sisters were screwing around and this and that. And Tony came in and chewed him out. He said, "You got to understand," he said, "this little job for $800 or whatever it was," he said, this is bread and butter. This pays your salary. Those big advertising jobs, they come and go. But I learned from that, hearing that story from Tony.
And I used to work, I mentioned before, I used to work with this guy, Hashi, a Japanese guy. His English wasn't all that great. So he negotiated a deal with an art director, and he'd have me listening on an extension, just with my hand over the mouthpiece. So he goes through this whole conversation with the art director. He makes the deal, and he hangs up the phone. We hang up the phone, and he comes over to me and says, "Oh, Joe," he says, "let me ask you, what's a billboard?" I say, "A billboard, Hashi. You drive down the highway, you see those big advertising signs along the highway." He says to me, "Oh, next time I charge more."
No shit. Can I throw in just a little thing here, just changing momentarily to one of the things that I loved being in the photo district. Once it got a little better, there were fewer dead bodies to step over in the morning. And one of the things that I loved is probably, well, as I said, I moved in 76, around the 80s, early through mid 80s, was I finished my day, could be anywhere, hardly ever 5 or 6. We all know how shootings go, sometimes 7, sometimes 8, sometimes 9. And my girlfriend would come over and meet me at my loft, and we'd go out to dinner. And we'd be walking out, could be 8, 9, 10 at night. And anywhere you went, you could see strobes flashing in the windows of the loft buildings. I mean, sometimes in the way.
Oh, we're losing Bob. We're losing you, Bob.
You left
I'm
me
kidding.
hanging.
The
Somebody
internet
at
in
the top
Barbados
floor
is
of
not always great.
175th
Yeah.
Avenue with the dome. Does anybody remember who that was?
What's that?
Top floor, 175th Avenue, some photographer has a studio up there. were always working.
Wasn't it a woman? Yeah, I know what you're talking about too.
They were always working late. Because when I worked with Hashi around the corner on 22nd Street, we used to work until, I don't know, midnight, sometimes 2 a.m. because he wouldn't show up at the studio until 10:30 in the morning anyway. And then we'd start shooting sometime around 2. But we'd work until 2 o'clock in the morning. We get out of there and walk around the corner, and there's flashing lights going off on the top floor of 175th.
Right.
I don't know whose studio it was, but I didn't feel so bad seeing that.
Yeah, one of the worst ones for me, I think it was working with Harold Lieberman, which is the same building as Gottlieb down on 14th and Broadway across from the park. And we're shooting for Kentucky Fried Chicken. And we needed to find the perfect thigh with the crispy crust on it. And the Kentucky Fried Chicken stuff is cooked in a pressure cooker. So we had to get it from the stores. So my day was from 8 in the morning till midnight, driving to different Kentucky Fried Chicken stores around Manhattan and picking up trays of thighs to bring back to the studio for the stylist to pick out the right one.
Sure.
I don't think we even got the right one that day. So I don't know how many pieces of chicken we went through.
Sounds like a normal day. I used to work for a lot of food guys that I remember one time we actually shot, who was it? Charlie Betts, who was like a catalog guy. We shot a lot of good food stuff. We actually did these steak things, and I can't remember the place. It was on 23rd Street. It was a real cool steakhouse. And we got them from there. We got these things going. It was a fake grill, and, you know, the stylist had brushed all the junk on it and stuff, made it look good, branded it and everything. And we finished up about 9 o'clock or so, and they had not given me a key to the studio yet. There was 3 photographers in this place, 23rd Street. So Charlie says, why don't you run somewhere a test down on, and we used a guy on I don't know, one of the labs by Union Square. And so I ran down there and, you know, put the test through and everything. I knew what was going on. By that time, they had stopped actually taking the steaks, and they were getting rid of the steaks. And so I was coming back, and as I was coming back, I felt for my keys to the studio, because they had just given me the keys. It was a big deal, and they were not there. The keys to the studio, and they had also already gone out to eat. They had already gone out to this 23rd Street food place. So I had to go in with Charlie, who I had borrowed his keys to the studio, and I was going to set up the film. Of course, the film was still down at the lab, keys gone. I actually had to go into the restaurant, and I was like crying, like, I've lost the keys. I don't know where they are. And he went, oh, this is not good. We actually had to wake up his partner. Can't remember. Somebody, Marks, I think it was. And we had to go beg the keys from him. And Charlie had to actually take the fall for me because, you know, no one wanted to give the assistant the keys. We eventually had to drag the meat out of the garbage and then actually reshoot the stuff. We got it done about 6 o'clock in the morning. We shot the whole damn thing. I lost the keys. They, you know, always looked at me like, you know, how can you even do that? But, you know, a disaster for sure. I've been on, and not, again, it's not me. It's not me. I don't know what happened. Maybe I had a hole in my pocket or something. But I've had a lot of things where, you know, you had to redo stuff, or you had to, you know, really not taking equipment. I was with Harry Benson several times. Harry wasn't always the most technical guy. And I would make sure everything was in there, everything we needed, because we were going to Paris or some God place. But Harry would always forget something. We'd always have something that would be personal for him. And it was always one of these things where we'd had to figure it out, find out the way to get it there, or maybe, whatever. Oh my God. You learn so much from just like the bad stuff happening. I have had assistants of my own do bad stuff, and I'll just go, hold on. Best thing to do, confess to me right now. Tell me what you did, and let's figure it out. Because if you sat there and thought about it and figured it, and then maybe you even got something better out of what you were shooting. But, all that stuff when you're an assistant is so much of a crisis, a dramatic, crazy, freaking crisis, Oh, and by the way, I didn't really lose the keys. Actually, the keys were at the studio.
But you have food shoot, right?
Let me ask you a question. Didn't Frank Mascotti own or was partners in a studio with Tony Petrocelli?
The name is familiar, yeah. I think
the name's familiar, but Tony had his place on Fifth Avenue. I don't remember.
Fifth Avenue, yeah.
Frank
I
Mascotti.
don't remember him sharing.
Frank Mascotti,
No.
Tony Petrocelli.
Got it.
Okay, because every way back when,
Yeah,
I was on 23rd Street, 119 West 23rd Street,
right.
and every Thursday, George Hausman, Frank Mascotti, and myself would
Houseman.
go to each other's studio to have lunch.
What was your address?
119 West 23rd. I was on the
You were across
first
the street
floor.
from Peter Kaplan.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
oh,
right.
yes,
Which
Peter
Peter
Big.
Kaplan?
yes, I was.
Michael, I ended up getting a studio on the second floor of the rear of that building.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, my studio was at the rear of the building on the 4th floor.
Yeah, right. The cool thing about that was that because at that point we had, these kind of wireless land, land things. And on the corner of 6th and 24th Street was Billy's Topless. And so we used to take the receiver and put it out on our balcony and then go down because they had a really great buffet. And so we and the people in my studio, we just like hang out down at Billy's Topless, which was a cool bar. It wasn't like so crazy and crappy or anything, but they had great food. So we would do our lunches down there, and we would answer our phones, while we're like, oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, we got to really, the music's a little loud. Joey, turn down the music. I can't do that now. Model's coming on stage. How can I help you, man? And
I took a client there, and my rep freaked out, and it was like I knew the client. It was an old friend, and I knew he'd love the place. That place was a little different. It wasn't the usual type of place.
Yeah,
it was a real New York institution. It became a bagel place.
Yes.
And one of my assistants, Norman, used to walk into the bagel place and yell in the back. He said, "Hey, bring out the girls."
So Bob, you were telling a story when you got dropped it there.
Yeah, sorry about that. It was just about how exciting it was to be walking out at any time of night and see flash just coming out of lofts all over the photo district. And if you ever were tempted to rest on your laurels, you said to yourself, somebody's about to bite me in the butt. They're catching up quick. They're working and I'm going out to dinner. I mean, if New Yorkers are notorious for being compulsive, hardworking people, well, that may be one of the reasons why, because there just was no rest for the wicked. You just looked around and said, damn, they're still shooting.
So here's the 64-cent question. Who was the quintessential person in the photo district?
Joe Toto.
Yeah.
No.
I'll go with that.
No.
It depends on what year and what era.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Baldav Dugal.
No.
I mean, Steigman had his studio for a long
Right,
time.
Steve.
How about Ugly George?
Oh my God. The alleyway crawler.
Right.
Yes,
Still-
hey, come with me. Come over here a second.
he-
Come over
he-
here.
He always walked around looking like a baked potato with that.
Oh, my God.
silver lame outfit.
You trip over that guy all over Manhattan. And
Yep.
yeah, he was just like,
How about the guys with the purple, the husband, the two hippies, the husband and wife, they're old hippies. They wore
Yeah,
purple velvet.
Yeah,
They rode
Mr. and
bicycles.
Mrs. Purple. Yeah,
Yeah.
they got divorced.
oh, that's
They
sad.
did.
So sad.
Hey, did anybody ever, I'm gonna have to run in a little bit. Anybody ever work for Peter Vaith?
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Paul Josabella
there.
worked for him quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah, I
got
got
I worked for him. I worked for him for 2 weeks, and I didn't want to, but it was a quiet period, and he was paying my rent, my rate,
Yeah.
which was more than he usually paid in 2 weeks. And when the 2 weeks were done, he had just moved into a studio on 40th and Madison.
And Madison Avenue, yeah.
Yeah, you had to take
That's
two
when he- that's when
elevators
he-
to get up there.
That's when after he was in Carnegie Hall, he moved up to 40th.
Yeah.
Right. And there was one day after we did jobs and this and that, there were 3 of us assisting, and he wanted the assistants to get a floor sander and sand down these doors so you could use them as tables. And I took one look and I'm going, I got allergies. I can't do this. And I had a funny relationship with him on that 2 weeks. And when it was done and I had to get paid, I brought in my invoice and just hung around his office. And the studio manager was giving me something about, oh, they pay in 30 days or they pay in this, that. I said, let me go talk to Peter. And I went up to Peter. I said, Peter, I brought in my invoice today. He looked at me for about 10, 15 seconds, and he went down to his secretary and he said, pay him, because he didn't want me hanging around the studio anymore.
Yeah, presence is a lot as far as bill paying goes.
Peter was kind of a funny guy. He was perhaps the most curt person I ever met.
He never assisted. That was one of the problems. I found out that
But
I
you
always
know who
wanted
was
to work for
worse?
people.
You know who was worse when it came to getting paid was John Olson.
Oh,
Boy,
Huh.
he was.
on
He was
20th
not-
Street.
Olson never had any money. I don't know what the hell was going on there, but I spent a lot of time working for John.
Okay.
That was 6
No,
West
John did
20th,
those
wasn't it? It was
straight
Nancy.
film.
John, wasn't he in Nancy Brown's building? 6
Well,
West?
yeah, I mean,
18th Street.
Nancy Brown was upstairs. John had the ground floor with the drive-in studio.
Yeah, Nancy was a good. Nancy, I knew when she was a model. That's how I met her.
Yeah, I met her when she was a model also.
Yeah, her and her husband and all of that. And her boyfriend that ended up getting divorced assisted me too for a while, freelance. Kept telling me, I don't know what these rumors are about. And everybody went, yeah, right.
I had a call one day from a reporter for Adweek. This had to be, I don't know, maybe 1998 or 99. They were writing a story about Klaus Luca, and I was his first assistant for most of 1980 before he fired me unceremoniously. She was trying to get me to dish dirt about Klaus. I wasn't saying anything. I would talk about what a great guy he was, how much fun it was to work for him. And she wanted to hear horror stories. And one of the things you learn, and one of the things I've always wanted my assistants, not that I was mean to anybody, but whatever what happens in the studio has got to stay in the studio. You can't be talking about that stuff later on.
Just so you know, Klaus and I are friends on Facebook, so you're a very smart man.
I always tell this. I never met him.
Well, Klaus really knew how to have fun. I mean, I have to say that he knew how to make the most downtime when you're on location.
And the other thing is, I ran into Klaus. I used to shoot out in LA, and we, unbeknownst to both of us, we stayed in the same inexpensive hotel in
Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
No, we stayed in an inexpensive hotel in Beverly Hills.
Not when I was there. Klaus and I were both staying in a very nice but inexpensive hotel in West Hollywood. And the only reason we found out we were both there is I walk into my room, and there was this door open. I heard some laughing, so I look in, and there's Klaus with a couple of assistants who got 16mm cinema gear all over the bed. And I say, Klaus, and he goes, Bob. And we're shaking hands and talking, and we had no idea that the other one was there until I literally saw him in his room with his 16mm gear. It was, one of the things I find entertaining is I'm not a contemporary of Steve Mizell's. I mean, I was at APA meetings and stuff with him, but I also realize that I'm about one generation older than most people here, except maybe Michael. I think, Michael, you and I are probably on the same, about the same age. I'm 70. So
I'll be 70, I'll be 78.
oh, okay. So you're a little over there.
He
And
wins.
I'm a little
but
more
it's funny,
seasoned.
exactly. It's funny because a lot of the people you're talking about assisting, I knew personally, and yeah, the stories are true. Hey, and I think in all fairness, each one of us learned because of how we were treated to try to be more reasonable with our assistants.
Oh, yeah.
But I think each one of us also knows until you are on that hot seat, you just don't know how much it burns. And you can. We're
That is
human.
true.
I know. I'm guilty. I confess. Mea culpa maxima. We can all lose it sometimes, and that's the nearest person. Maybe the person who's covering your ass for you and helping you, but sometimes they catch the shit. So, in all fairness, we've all seen this from both sides. I hope I'm speaking the truth here that we try not to be that way to our assistants, but sometimes
I think you are, and you can fail, because I remember being out on location one day and said to my assistant, I wanted to clean the lens, said, Jimmy, I said, give me the dust off, will you? And he looks at me, he says, the dust off? I said, yeah. He said, I don't have the dust off. So where's the dust off? He says to me, I left it in the hotel. I said, I didn't fly the dust off 800 fucking miles for you to leave it in a hotel. That was the nastiest thing I ever said to anybody. And I regretted it. And I apologize profusely.
well, you know, we've all been there though. The pressure can get to you.
Yeah, no, that's all of that is very true. You know, and that was the story. I don't know if you were on, Bob, when I told the story about, you know, when the assistants can share in the profits, they can share in the losses.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, I was on. Sorry about the intermittency. At home, I'm good, but here at this little rented cottage, it's a lovely place, but the internet is very funky. So
I have a Klaus Luca question, because I said I didn't know him and anything, but I always said that he was the first one to really send out effective mailers.
Oh yeah,
direct
Luca
mail.
is coming.
Well, no, it just said Luca on it in big letters. And what I heard from somebody is he said he didn't care what the picture was on the mailers. Everybody sweated about the pictures. He said, I just want to make sure my name is nice and big, so as they throw it into the garbage, they can receive the name.
Right.
Is that true?
That is true. Klaus came from, he was working in Montreal, and he decides to move to New York City. So before he shows up in New York, he starts sending out mailers that said, Luca is coming. That was it, postcards, big letters, Luca is coming. and then he arrives, of course, he had some interesting stuff that he did. He had a guy, this guy Paul, who worked in the darkroom. All Paul did was take stuff from shoots and enlarge them onto Polaroid film, and then cut them out and laminate them. And Klaus had this accordion accordion fold portfolio that was like 2 by 3 inches, right? But his advertising was wonderful. Anytime he did a mailer, it was always great. He never sweated the picture. He just say, we'll do that one. But yeah, Luca, big letters at the bottom.
Oh.
Always black background and always big name in white. That was what he did.
Yeah, well, listen, I can attest to the fact of what a good promotion piece does. And it's true. Sometimes they don't remember the picture exactly, but they remember the other stuff.
Well, one guy called me up one day. He used to work with this art director. His name was Ernie Blitzer. And then I didn't hear from him for a while. And one day my phone rings. And I'm in the studio and I answer it. And the voice on the phone says, hey, Joe, it's Ernie Blitzer. Bet you didn't expect to hear from me. Well, I had him on my mailing list. I've been mailing him shit for like 11 years, every month. Of course I expected. Said Ernie, of course I expected to hear from you. I've been mailing you stuff for 11 years. He says, well, it worked. He says, I need you to shoot an annual report for me. And he starts to tell me about the project. I said, wait a minute. What was it that caught your eye? Which mailing was it? Because I don't know, something red. That was it. He didn't remember what it was. Just remembered it.
And then you had folks like Phil Marco who just put his name in the black book.
Yeah, well, that was,
Okay. Come
come up here. Look, the people.
Oh, that's Billy's assistant.
Yeah, get a haircut and beat it. Yeah, I still do a lot of mailers. And it's the cheapest thing because, I'll send out all kinds of email, PDFs, anything, website. My website is crap, but I will dog you like nothing else. The photographers I work for, a lot of people, they taught me how to get on a phone and talk to people. And so if I talk to you, we are going to do some work together because I won't let you go until you tell me no.
My favorite story, it has nothing to do with me. When I was down in Tribeca, I was in this loft building, and the guy who owned the building had two buildings side by side. They shared, there was a freight elevator in my building, but he'd cut holes in the other building so that it could serve both buildings. The guys across from my loft were this guy Mike Biondo and his studio mate, a woman by the name of Karen Keon, who had just come to New York. And Karen would go see some art director or magazine editor with her portfolio, and they'd say, "Oh, we really like your work." And she'd say, "Okay, when do we start?" And that's how she got work. Usually you go into somebody's office, you sit talk to them for 20 minutes, they'll say, "Oh, wonderful, I got nothing for you now." But Karen would say, the guy would say, "Oh, wonderful, before you got to, I got nothing for you now." It's great. When do we start?
Yeah, get people to say yes to something, anything.
Well, guys, I'm going to have to run because I got a 3 o'clock.
Great. Well, good to see you,
That I
Jack.
got to do.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, this is great. Love the stories, guys. Good seeing everybody. Bob, good seeing you for first time in forever.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to see you, Jack, and looking forward to your visit.
Looking forward to it myself. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Jack. Take care.
So,
Bye-bye.
Joe, do you and Jeff know each other?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, I know you're both in Chicago now.
You're in Chicago, Joe?
I'm actually out in the burbs.
Oh, that's almost Chicago.
It's almost. I ate enough hot dogs though. Look at this. Oh, you can't tell because I'm wearing a black shirt. I'm eating enough hot dogs and Lou Malnati's pizza. I got,
Speaking of hot dogs, we should talk to Newman about who was the guy out on Route 4, was it, or 46?
Oh, no, you're talking about Ruts.
Ruts.
Yeah.
Hut.
Ruts Hut.
Ruts Hut. Without, Dennis Connors. Dennis Connors used to do, a meeting of all the photographers in the area, New Jersey, New York, and everything. And we would always meet at Ruts. It is, if you've never been to Ruts Hut, it is the temple, the absolute temple of hot dogs.
Don't they fry their hot dog or something like that?
You've never been to Chicago.
No, dude, I've been to Chicago and I've eaten every kind of hot dog all over the world. I've had hot dogs in Thailand. And believe me, Ruts is it.
You know who recently closed down after 65 years in New Jersey?
Hiram's?
Fireside.
Oh, Fireside. Yeah, that's sad. Paramus,
Fireside.
up on Route 4.
Well,
yeah, really
it's on
great
Route 4.
place.
It's not Paramus. It's
Route
actually Little
17.
Falls. It's Little Falls. No, it's Little Falls.
There's a
they've been gone forever.
No, just closed down. Just closed down 3 days ago.
No, that's Fireside in on Route
Fireside.
17.
There's a great
Route
place
17.
on River Road in Fort Lee called
Callahan's.
where they boil the hot dogs in beer.
Oh, sure.
Callahan's is pretty good.
Yeah.
Excuse me, gentlemen, I'm going to have to sign off as well. Great meeting many of you.
Yeah,
Hey, Bob,
thanks, Bob.
where are
with
you
all
now?
of you.
Where are you now, Bob?
I've
Barbados.
lived in Barbados for 28 years,
Wow.
but I'm actually staying. My wife and daughter and I are staying at a little staycation cottage right on the sea on the West Coast for a week. And we live over on the East Coast, and I have much better internet over there. Sorry, I've been dropping in and out on you guys. But I just wanted to say it's been great. It's really fun. This is actually, as John can tell you, the first one I've ever attended. And John says he's going to let me do a presentation. Going to show a whole bunch of my Polaroids from the old studio days from about mid 70s through early 90s, and a bunch of other things. So when I get to do that, when I finally get my act together, John's been waiting patiently for about
I know
4
we've been
months.
talking about this for what, 6 months?
I mean, maybe 6, yeah. But I promise I will, Don. And I'm
Cool.
looking forward to being back.
Thank you. It's good to meet you.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
And great. And I really enjoyed hearing all the stories and stuff. It's really, it really does bring back memories. I mean, memories. Alrighty. Take care.
Be well.
care.
Bye,
I'll
Steve.
tell you about,
Bye-bye.
I'll tell you,
Anyone else have any last minute
the
stories or
the
anything? you
photo
wanna
district. I'll tell you what I learned about the photo district. Was that I wanted to get out of the photo district. I worked for so many guys in their studios when I was an assistant till 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, that I decided that studios are like submarines, even though I had one of my own. Studios like a submarine. I'd much rather do location work. And so I started to build a business where I got to travel and didn't have to be in a studio all the time. Not to say that, something wrong with studios, but studio is just another location to me. That's what I used to say.
Mhm. Yeah, the thing that I learned about the photo district is that, it was really a place of community, and it was a place of sharing. And that may sound all, beautiful and stuff, but really it had so much of, you really did feel like that New York City was the place where photography was going to be made, where it was going to be used, where it would be better, disseminated. We had all the agencies and we had all magazines and everything. And so the outlets were there, the talent was there, we were all there, and, you really had that community. You really had that idea that whatever you needed was there, and whoever you
everybody knew
wanted to
everybody
meet
else.
was there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's all gone. It really is gone.
It's
Well,
it's
now, yeah.
it's
I
kind of
mean,
like blown out, it's kind of
Madison Avenue is gone.
yeah.
The-
Yeah.
the
Well,
com-
Madison Avenue doesn't exist the way it
I
used
think
to.
that the camaraderie that was there back then, first of all, we were animals when it came to like bidding against each other for work. But beyond that particular aspect of it, there was a certain camaraderie before work and after work. I mean, I really, to this day, remember some of the things at Langley Studio, and other places. But Langley Studio was sort of like the place to hang out.
Well, he had a bar.
Wait, that's right. But
He had a freaking bar in his studio.
But do you remember when Jay Maisel and Barbara Bordnick used to banter back and forth with each other? They would talk, and Jay would say, "You don't know what the fuck you're talking about." And she would turn to him and says, "You shut the fuck," I mean,
First of all,
just incredible stuff.
Don't argue with Jay, number one. Big mistake. Number one, don't ever argue with Jay.
Well, Barbara Bordnick could get away with it. She really held her own.
Well,
But,
they had a
Jay-
relationship for a while.
Jay was an interesting guy. I first met him in I think it was 1987. I was working on a project that he was working on. It was a documentary project called Document Brooklyn, and it was everybody who had a connection to Brooklyn because Jay was from Brooklyn, and so I met him during that project, and we became pretty good friends. But I got invited. There was and it's too bad Jack is gone because he was part of this thing. There was a monthly salon that we used to at Steve Hellerstein's studio on West 26th Street or West 28th Street. He was over by the river, and we used to go and hang out at Steve's and show each other pictures. I don't know. There's probably a core group of about 20 photographers, and then there was always somebody who was invited in. And I remember being the first time I was invited. I was invited to show pictures of New York City that I had made because I had a large collection in New York. I doing a lot of stock photography, and the night I showed up, Jay had just come out with a book called Jay Maisel's New York. So Jay walks in with his book, and I've got a tray of 20 slides, and I felt like vastly inferior. The interesting thing was, I was in his book. There's a picture of me in that book. But that's beside the point, because he was shooting in Chinatown when I was shooting in Chinatown, and I'm in the background of one of his pictures. But I was showing slides, and I had done a shot of the New York skyline from Brooklyn, from under the Brooklyn Bridge, and it was very colorful. And what I did was I took it in Photoshop and cut it at the waterline, flopped it, and made like a mirror image. And Steve Wilkes was talking about how smooth the lake was. So this image comes up on the screen, and Jay is in the back of the room, and he says, "Oh, I've never seen the river that still before." And I don't know how Jack knew about it, because I didn't talk about it to Jack, but Jack turns around and says, "It's Photoshop, Jay." And Jay gives me a dirty look. He says to me, "Now you're fucking around." He didn't like that very much.
I think you had a Peter B. Kaplan story with the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, the time Peter tried to sue me?
Yeah.
Peter called me up one day. Says to me, "Joe." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Peter B." I said, "Hey, Pete, what's going on?" He says to me, "I'm suing your ass." So what are you talking about? You're suing me? He says to me, "I'm going to sue you." So what for? He says, "Infringement." So what are you talking about? He says to me, "The New York Times ad." I said, "What New York Times ad?" And then he shot me an email with a scan of a New York Times ad. I had done an aerial of the Statue of Liberty's torch, and some ad agency bought it as a stock picture and comped it into a shot of the New York skyline with from some fisheye lens, and it looked like his signature picture, Liberty Mon Amour. I don't have anything to do with it. I told him, I said, "Don't sue me, I'll testify for you." But he was really pissed off. So I'm going to sue you.
Peter was pissed off at everybody.
Yeah,
He was all
God
right.
bless him.
He was all right.
He was all right.
Yeah,
So,
Steve Becklider was on a few weeks ago, and he had this great story where Peter and Jay borrowed his car to go shooting from the bridge. And while they were up on the bridge, the car got stripped, and they had the 600mm lens, and they're taking pictures of the people stripping his car.
Oh my
Couldn't
God.
do anything about it.
Yeah.
That's
The
funny.
bridge was wonderful.
Peter wanted me to work for him. I'll tell you a funny story.
Yeah.
When ASMP was at 205 Lex, there was some ASMP meeting. We were all up there. And Peter says, "Hey, I did some great new stuff I want to show you. Well, let's go back to my studio." And it was me, it was Peter and me, Jake Raj, and I remember who else. I think Steve Krongard. And we go back to Peter's studio, and he's showing slides. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's looking for something. He can't find the picture he's looking for. And all of a sudden, he looks over his shoulder and says, "David, where's that blah, blah, blah?" And his head pops up from in between the filing cabinets. He had all these filing cabinets where he kept his pictures, his slides. And that was his assistant. And this guy was there at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday night. God knows what he was doing. I have no idea. But it wasn't long after that Peter says to me that David left or was leaving. And Peter says to me, "You ought to come work for me. I want to talk to you. I'll take you out to lunch." Takes me out to Blimpies on the corner of 6th Avenue, 23rd Street. There was a Blimpies there. So we have lunch at Blimpies. He makes me a job offer for like $100 a week. And I said, no way. No way am I working for you. Not for $100 a week, not till 2 o'clock in the morning. You got to be out of
Wait a
here.
minute, was this the place on 23rd Street?
Yeah.
A Blimpie.
Yeah,
It was on the
yeah.
corner.
Yeah.
Stanley.
Okay.
Big spender.
Cool. Well,
Big
we're just hit over 2 hours here, so I think we've gonna come to an end here. It's been great hearing the stories. We'll try to do this again in some time, get more people in. We'll share this video out so people can see what fun we had and see what other stories we can get in. So I'm gonna stop
Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm jealous of all you guys living in New York.
You say that now.
To all you
It's not what it used to be.
Leon,
Yeah.
did you have something?
Sure.
Yeah, I've got a question for all the RIT grads. I'm an RIT grad, but I, unlike you, was an engineer and just got into photography late in life. But I had a good friend by the name of Rich Capola who went to work in New York City, graduated in probably about 73 or 74. Does anybody know him?
No.
What's his name?
Yeah.
Richard Capola.
Don't know.
Cope.
Yeah.
That was after me.
Guys come and go in your life, and every so often you think about him. And he was just wondering if anybody heard from him.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't start
My
working
only-
until I think 75 after college. So
Yeah, he's one of my only photo major roommates that I think might have actually made it. As you guys know, an awful lot of you did not.
Yeah, it's true.
well, there
There's
were
a
a lot
lot
of RIT guys in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can believe that. Yeah.
And my
No, I-
favorite thing was, I mentioned, we talked about who's the quintessential photo district guy, and I said Joe Toto. I used to work for Toto. He had his main guy. He always filled the studio at Freelance. He had one assistant, this guy, Joe Peoples. And he filled the studio with freelancers. And at the time, it was Joe Toto, Joe Peoples, Joe Berger, who was also an RIT guy, and me. So you walk in the studio and you say, "Hey, Joe," 4 guys turned around.
It's funny. And Stephen, the word that the engineers heard was that the photo science major was the hardest class, the hardest major on campus.
It may have been at the time, but I look at how rigorous it was compared to the graduate work I did at the University of Arizona later. And the photo science program wasn't that difficult compared to optical sciences.
Yeah, well, the word that was in the engineering department was, you took all the physics from the physics department, the chemistry of the chemistry department, the math of the math department. We engineers got away lucky. We only took, easy physics and not too much chemistry. But
well, the sad part of all that is when I was in high school, I was not really a great student. I would much rather, as I said, cut out of school 3 days a week and go take pictures down on the street in New York City. But I never much paid attention to chemistry or physics, and I get in, or math for that matter, and I get into, I start going to work, and I find out that photography is all chemistry and physics. And I don't learn it anyway.
Well, the thing that I like best about RIT is if you wanted to have one-to-one relationships with any of the faculty members, you could. And I ended up with some great relationships with lots of the faculty members and the staff people. In fact, the first quarter of my senior year, I made the wrong dean's list. I got engaged and disengaged, and that kind of emotional roller coaster is not good for your grades. Yeah. And I got back to school early, and I was in the shoemaker's office, the director's office, talking to his assistant. And she said, "There must have been something wrong, Stephen. I got your grades, and they're ridiculously low." And I said, no, I did that. She said, "Would you prefer I not send them home to your parents?" And I said, "Well, I can't ask you to do that, but if they never go to my parents, I'd greatly appreciate it." My parents never knew that I was on the probation list.
Well, photo school is interesting because I've been an amateur photographer since I was like 12. And I get to college, I'm 18, and they gave us first semester. They gave us a list of assignments that they wanted us to complete by the end of the semester. They didn't say you had to do it in any particular order. And there was one about front projection where you had to find a model, project something on the girl and, your name and phone number or something. So I found this girl who would agree to take her clothes off. And I brought her in the studio one day and I checked out a slide projector. I had made a slide with my name and phone number on it. And I setting up the front projection shot. And Irving Schild, who I mentioned earlier, says to me, "Hey, Pobereskin, what you doing?" So I'm doing front projection. He says, "You can't do that." So why not? He says, "That's assignment number 11. There's only week 4. You can't do that." I said, "Why can't I do it?" He says, "Because I didn't teach you that yet." You got to teach me how to do it?
Actually, one of my favorite days at RIT, I was still a freshman. And at the time, there was a photo contest for incoming freshmen. You submitted 5 photos, and the photographer's photos they liked the most got a $500 scholarship, which at the time was a very big scholarship. The tuition for the year was $1,200. I didn't realize that they were never going to give this to a photo science major. There was not a chance of that happening. But a couple of months after I was there, I ran into one of the people who had been one of the judges. And we were talking, he said, oh, you know, I really like your photos. And there was one that was just amazing. And we were curious about how you did it. It was a great close-up shot of a raccoon drinking water at a stream. And we loved it. What kind of telephoto lens did you use? How did you get that? I said, oh, that was a diorama at the Natural History Museum.
Nice. I have a question. I'm curious if there's going to be any more photo expos in New York City. I mean, I'm obviously
not at
last year.
this rate. Not at this rate.
Yeah.
By the way, they just canceled the auto show.
The auto show's gone.
Javits Center. Yeah. No.
I have a lot of clients that do shows there, and that, you know, are a good chunk of money in January and December. So I'm looking at that. But, you know, there was a point where the photo expos, when it was, you know, run by PDN and stuff, when the photo expos are really, you know, a great place because you get to meet people, you kind of knew people were coming into town and stuff like that. Some of us assistants had a couple reunions there.
Billy, here was the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said about the photo show. The problem, though, is that whole thing is actually paid for by the manufacturers. The cost of putting up a booth at the Javits Center was enormous, and I seriously believe that the photo industry as we knew it has been devastated by mainly Apple, and then consequently Samsung. But I don't think that the photo industry is going to come back anytime soon, if ever, nor is it going to happen the way shows were done previously. I'd be very curious to find out if the PMA show is going to happen, the Photo Marketing Association in Las Vegas. Right. I mean, Las Vegas is getting nailed big time with COVID. It's just insidious, I think, that what's going on with people not wanting to be vaccinated, and yet they got vaccinated for whooping cough and
polio.
You know, all kinds of other stuff.
Smallpox vaccinations have been around for almost 300 years.
How about polio? Remember polio?
Mm-hmm. I was part of Salk's test group.
Oh, really?
They ran the test group with first graders in the Pittsburgh public school system, and it was so much fun being in a room with a bunch of screaming 6- and 7-year-olds getting blood drawn and injections.
Yeah. We don't see you walking.
That's right.
I have one thing to say. In those shows, when you said blood drawn, I ran 2 blood drives during those shows. If I remember, I don't know if I got Jay in there or Steven. I should have asked Steven, because we got I think 30 donations from photographers or whoever else when we did the New York community blood, whatever they are.
Blood drive.
Blood drive. And I used to work for them, and I said, hey, listen, I'm going to set this up. And we actually had 2 blood drives during those shows. I couldn't tell you the years, but it was probably maybe the late 80s or something like that. But that was pretty well attended, the blood drive. But, you know, those shows really were wonderful. I saw them skewing more toward the amateur market and the Me Too market, or whatever, the market that, you know.
Let me explain something to you. If you think of back when the photo industry was in its heyday.
Yeah.
All right. It was shaped like a pyramid. All right.
Yeah.
The very tip of that pyramid, maybe I'm going to go out of my way and say 10% of all the people that owned cameras were at the very tip of that
Oh,
pyramid.
yeah,
called
sure, of
professional.
course, Mike, sure.
And then the rest of it was all the wannabes.
Right, sure.
Camera companies could never live if they had to wait for professional photographers.
Oh my
to
God,
buy-
no,
to buy equipment.
the
okay?
amateur market in film was so much bigger, trillions of times bigger than what we were shooting.
And I'm at, I don't want to say I'm at fault of it, but I was part of the mentality of it being, if the Canon camera was good for Arnold Newman, it's got to be good for me.
Right.
If Eric Miola was shooting with the Canon camera, it's got to be good enough for me. Or Seth Resnick, or John Paul Campanegro, or you name it.
Sure.
I remember one particular
Or
Canon
Jeff
commercial.
Yeah.
I remember one particular Canon commercial that just purely pissed me off. It was two photographers wearing photo vests, and the commercial, they're shooting, I think, some fucking rodeo. And the commercial said, "Can you tell the professional photographer?" And you couldn't, because they were both wearing photo vests shooting Canon cameras. And it really kind of belittled the profession of photography.
Yeah,
that's right.
By saying that, anybody can shoot this stuff. Of course, now these days, clients are shooting stuff with their fucking iPhones. So
yeah,
fuck them.
It's
fuck you, Newler.
Right.
It's your fault. Fuck you.
Yeah, that guy, or wherever you are.
I never wore a photo vest ever in my life. And,
Oh.
I used to work for this guy, this industrial shooter. His name was Ted Horowitz. And we were out somewhere in, I don't know, Wyoming somewhere, middle of winter time. It was freezing. You can't load somebody's cameras, much less your own, with gloves on. So Ted kept telling me, you got to buy a pair of gloves. You got to buy a pair of gloves. And I would say, Ted, I can't do my job in gloves. You want me to load 35? You want me to load Nikons with gloves on? It can't be done. And he kept hounding me about, I've got to buy gloves. When you get back to New York, I got to buy gloves. We came out of some factory out there, and I loaded up the car, and Ted took his gloves off, put them on the deck lid of the trunk, and he went out to do something. And I took those gloves, man, I threw them in the trash, and he spent the rest of that week saying to me, "Where are my gloves? Do you see my gloves?" No, I haven't seen your gloves.
I have several vests. I work for Habitat for Humanity. I've been all over the world with these guys. It's a terrific organization. Let me see. Do I have? Yeah, probably something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's backwards, but yeah, I've done 32 years with Habitat, with International, and my affiliate over in Patterson. And you had to wear, like we used to do these things, the Jimmy Carter Work Project, and you had to actually wear the thing. And it was one of the best vests I ever got. Actually, I love to wear it, but it's not practical anymore. But the vest that we had, it said HFHI on the back, and that would be the way that people would be able to say, "All right, you can go over and take pictures of Carter while he's over doing his house."
Wait. By the way, Billy.
Yeah.
Why isn't it practical for you to wear that vest anymore?
Well, I have less equipment that I'm taking out on jobs, and the problem is that the vests themselves.
No, wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does it fit?
Oh yeah, no, it actually does. And that was the thing. These things were so modular and wonderful. I'd go down right now. I got Fuji vests. I've got vests from, I think I got a Nikon vest. But these HFHI, the Habitat vests, were wonderful. And, they wouldn't let you walk around without one on, because it was that kind of thing that you were, when you have 5,000 people that spoke a billion different languages, and the only thing they know was Habitat for Humanity International, or the letters, and it was celebrities and presidents and crazy people.
I have to explain something to everybody that's still here listening. I have not been my normal self today. I'm really not feeling well, but I wanted to come in and listen, and I really didn't say that much, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm not feeling that well, and had difficulty breathing. I had a pulmonary stress test a couple of days ago, and that's not working well. Into
It's
my
the
head.
headphones, Mike.
No,
Yeah.
no. It's the tight jock strap that I wear. No,
I'll tell you, I gotta tell you a Canon story.
I can't hear you.
Cannon's.
Canon story.
Oh, boy.
Oh.
So
We'll finish on this story.
at one point, you know, I was married, we started to have kids, and of course I wanted to take pictures of my son. He starts walking. He wasn't taking direction. And I'd say, Aaron, hold it. He just kept going. So I could no longer focus fast enough to keep up with a 16-month-old who was walking. So I was thinking about going to autofocus, and I called Sam Garcia out in Garden City at Nikon and had him send me, I forget what the camera was at the time, an N2020 with a bunch of lenses. And I was telling a friend of mine about it who was using Canons. He said, well, if you're going to look at Nikon autofocus, why don't you look at Canon autofocus? I said, I don't know anybody at Canon. He says, well, just call them up, tell them who you are. They can look you up in New York Gold or on the internet or something, and they'll figure it out. So I called Canon, and they sent me the equivalent set with a Canon A2, right? It turns out I make my tests and shooting side by side, and I found out that all the Nikon lenses, when I look back at the light box, this is 1994, right? So digital hadn't really come in yet. I'm looking at all my results on the light box. The Nikon lenses were good. They were fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but they weren't all the same. Color contrast was not the same lens to lens. The results from the Canon stuff was uniform across the board, and it led me to believe that Canon obviously manufactured to a much tighter tolerance than Nikon did. And as long as I was going to go out and drop $30,000 on all new stuff anyway, I decided to buy Canons. And I waltzed into Ken Hansen Photographic when he was on Madison Avenue. It was like a jewelry store. It was after he had moved from 920 Broadway uptown to 53rd Street. I do some horse trading with Kenny, and I walk out with a bunch of stuff and my phone, and I take it back and take the batteries out of Nikons, put them in the closet, and I'm now a Canon shooter, and my phone rings, and the voice on the other end of the phone says, my name is John Dykstra. I work for Warner Brothers. And I said, John Dykstra, you're a special effects guy. He says to me, yeah. So what can I do for you? Says to me, I need, we're working on a Batman film. We need to make backgrounds. I'm told you're the guy to talk to for pictures in New York. I need you to go out and shoot cityscapes and stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to take your big shots, and then you're going to go back and shoot details of buildings. We're going to rebuild the buildings, drop them back in to the thing, and we're going to make the backgrounds. I want you to do it with a 4x5 view camera. And I said, you're out of your mind. I said, first of all, you wouldn't have the range of lenses that I would need on 4x5. And stuff it's too slow, and I'm not going to have the lenses that I need. I said, and aren't you shooting the film in 35? Yes. I said, so why can't I shoot 35? So I'll shoot on Kodachrome. It's fine grain. It's no problem. And he says to me, okay, what kind of cameras are you using? And I said, Canon. He says, primes or zooms? I said, zooms. He says, can't do it with zoom lenses. So why not? He says, because zoom lenses all have pincushion distortion. So we're going to be matching up the edges of frames to put the recomposite of photographs to make the backgrounds. He says, it's not going to work with zoom lenses. So put the batteries back in the Nikon. Someone else shot this job. The last job I shot with Nikons instead of my Canon with the zoom lenses. So that was just an interesting little bit.
But that wasn't true even back then. The lens.
Well, it was. I had to test it. I couldn't believe it. I tested. Sure enough, the edges go like this with the Canon zooms. Yeah.
Well, on that note,
straight lines at the edge would curve in.
I'm going to stop the feed out to Facebook.
But by the way, that's a great advertorial.
But what the thing is, about the Canon, the smartest thing they ever did was come up with the white lenses.
Yeah.
Because then you go to some football game. And everybody's got long lenses, these white lenses. You know what they were using? They were using Canons.
Right, that was a
And
marketing
that
move.
made a lot of people buy Canon cameras.
Well, the other part of it too was that the white, they claim that the black lenses sucked in the heat.
No,
The
bullshit.
white lenses reflect. Well, that's what they were telling people.
Yeah.
But it was a marketing move.
The white
Yeah, they
lenses
used to
really
say
stood-
because they
stand
had
out.
fluoride elements in them, they needed to have the white coating to reflect the heat.
Right.
That's good BS.
Well, some of the lenses are black. I hate to say it. My favorite
But-
Canon lenses is still a 28 to 105.
Right, the white ones are the ones
And
that
it's
have a
black.
fluoride element.
He's right.
So anyway, thank you all. This has been a lot of fun today. We've lost half of the crew, but till
John,
next
you would
time.
send out, can you send out a link to?
Yeah, I'll send out a link to the
these
recording once I
recordings?
have it
Yeah.
done.
Because I don't know if I was like yelling at my computer in the beginning.
We heard you.
Good.
Just give me
Good.
1 second.
So,
Cool.
yeah.
No conversation on Monday. I'm going to be away. We're back next Thursday where I'm going to have Urs Rescher, who's a photographer in Switzerland with Broncolor, to talk about lighting and answer questions about lighting. So I'm really looking forward to that one. So we'll see you then.
Hey,
Thank
John,
you.
do me a favor.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
John, do me a favor. Send me
John?
the actual URL that people can click on to go directly to a registration.
Yeah, let me stop the recording and then we'll figure that out. So-
All right, okay.
And then I'll talk to Harris too.